Good morning, welcome to Howl Bushcraft. This is our live stream of our primary bushcraft course. Given recent circumstances out in the world, we are without clients today, so we thought, what could we do to sort of, have an excuse to spend some time in the woods, to be honest. So we thought we'd live stream our primary course, some of the content, just to give you something to watch today if you're at home, and also just to pass some of the information out. And hey, you know, it works as a good advert for us as well, so share it if you like, get people involved, get people watching. This is our base camp. So we set up our camps here in the woods with pretty minimal setup. So the idea is that we want to give people an immersive experience, so we try and as much as possible create fly camps. So tarps like this that are just strung up like they would be on our canoe expeditions, and as little equipment as possible really, so we don't leave anything in place when we come here. We've got a couple of logs and things for seats, but otherwise we pretty much set up an expedition camp every time we run a course, so you get that sort of feeling when you're out with us. So yeah, basic tarp, we've got a fire on with the kettle. Let's drop hand to that, why not?
Yes.
So we've always got a kettle over the fire when we've got clients here, so there's always the opportunity for a hot drink. And typically what we would do is bring you down here for about a half-hour walk from the cars, get you settled, get a hot drink in your hands, and then give you a briefing. And the briefing's usually pretty short, but we talk to you all about the admin of being in the woods, so looking after yourselves, keeping warm, making sure you've got a drink if you need it, showing you where the loos are, which are discreetly hidden in the trees, and as soon as possible we crack on. So let's head back over to the primary bushcraft course then is basically a one-day introductory course. So it's aimed at people that have never really done bushcraft before. Maybe they've done loads of hiking and wild camping and that sort of thing, but they want a bit more of a sort of connective experience with nature. Or it might be that you've not done any of those things before and you feel like it's something you might want to do. So the whole concept of the day is centered around getting you set up, equipping you with the sort of skills and information you need to camp out overnight. So all those kind of fundamental primary skills that will mean that when you come to spend a single night or a couple of nights in the woods, you can do so comfortably, you can do so at home, and you can look to natural resources to make that happen for you. So rather than carrying all the sort of equipment in your rucksack, we look at how natural resources can come into play in order to do that. The first session then, as we open, is setting a tarp up. So if you're camping, one of the very first things you want to do is look to your shelter. So we'll look at a couple of different shelter options as we go along today. The first one, the most kind of practical really for most people that go camping, is a tarp. So we look at basically three knots for setting the tarp up, and then lining that up with some trees and getting yourself comfortable. So that would be the first session this morning. As I said in an earlier video today, do bear with us if there are things like aeroplane noise in the background, if the signal just suddenly cuts out and we run out of 4G, or it's quite cold out, so if the batteries die. We'll do our best to keep making these live streams as we go along today, but it might just be that they stop abruptly for some technical difficulty. But we'll try and get a post out and let you know what's going on. Alright, so normally there'd be a bit of back and forth here, and I'd be talking to clients, and there'd be stops in my day. So running from brief to this to that to the other, it's a little unusual for me, but hey, we'll see how we get on. I hope you're all well, by the way, everybody watching this, and keep yourselves and your loved ones happy during this time as much as you can. We are thinking about you here at Howl. I've got Max behind the camera today.
Hey guys. Trying to double film, so apologies.
Oh yeah, if the camera's moving about a bit, what we're doing is we're filming this live on my phone to stream to Facebook. We're also filming it on my camera to hopefully have a slightly better quality video that we can sort of edit together and put out in a couple of days' time, just so it kind of is there and it'll live on the Facebook page indefinitely. So I've not really planned anything other than how the primary day would go. Have you got anything to add to this at this point, Max?
Not much. It's just going to be kind of little teasers of each one, really, until we don't have time to run a full primary day.
We'd be here until 5:30. So running the full thing, let alone all the technical bits and bobs of the cameras and whatnot.
But we'll give you the juicy bits.
We'll give you the sexy rundown camping in the woods. All right, so Forgive us any sort of jarring camera work or technical difficulties, but otherwise we're going to crack on. I reckon we'll take a quick stop now. I'll just get some equipment out and we'll come back for the next live stream. It will be setting up a tarp in the woods. Say, probably 80-90% of the time, if you're camping in the woods, you're going to want to be under a tarp. So the reason we include this in our primary bushcraft day is that for a lot of people, they may have been camping in tents, so the opportunity to camp under a tarp is again one of those sort of immersive experiences. You've got a 360 vision of the woods around you. You're really kind of connected to the environment. It's light and it's practical as well, and it's really versatile, so you can string them in lots of different configurations to get them set up. What we focus on today's course though is setting up a good roof. So the knots on this day course are actually quite secondary. So we, on our itinerant course, we'll teach you 3 knots that we basically use constantly to set tarps up. They take a little bit of learning, a little bit of practice, so having those sort of 2 days to practice those a few times makes a bit more sense. Because I've just got people today for 1 day and we've got a lot to cram in, what I want to do is give them sort of maximum opportunity to retain the knowledge that I give them. So rather than concentrating on knots in particular, I'd rather they focus on what a good tarp, once it's set up, looks like. So the angles of the roof, the way it's pitched, and what to sort of observe in the environment to give you the best possible camp out experience. So we will do some knots today, but they're basically ones that you can learn really quickly, tie really easily, and they're actually quite easy to relearn as well. So if it's a case of you just remember what they're called, you can quickly look them up when you get home, and they're really easy to tie. So we'll have a quick wander into the woods. I'll see if we can trick Max up on the way he's filming, and we'll get a top set up. So let's head over this way. Alright, so like I say, we're going to set up for a camp out of an overnight. So we want quite a quick setup, something that's easy to replicate whilst you're out in the woods. A couple of things we might point out on the course is where's safe to camp. So if you can see behind me, there's a big stand of beech trees there, which we don't advise camping under. Beech trees historically were known as widowmakers, so they're quite prone to dropping limbs, really big limbs, and quite often for no apparent reason they'll just drop a big limb. So we don't recommend you camp under those at all. So in general, stay away from beech trees. Otherwise, just have a quick look around, have a look up in the trees that you're going to be camping directly underneath, make sure there's nothing overhead that can land on you, you know, dead branches, that sort of thing. Make sure the trees that you're tying to are relatively healthy and alive, and have a quick sort of scan a little bit further into the woods there to make sure there's no kind of leaning trees that could fall into camp, so you're not putting yourself at risk in that way. And then otherwise, it's quite instinctual actually. I find most people, when they consider that they're going to be laying down on the floor, have got quite a good instinct for where would be sensible to sleep. So a flatter bit of ground where there's not too much vegetation to get in your way, making sure you're not in a hollow, so again water doesn't collect where you're sleeping and end up waking up in a puddle, that sort of thing. But we kind of look at those sorts of things today, so we'll kind of wander about a little bit and find a good spot. We've got one here for the purposes of our live stream. So let's set this tarp up. We keep all our tarps nice and wrapped neat so we can deploy them quickly when we come to camp. And this first attachment point we're going to do around this nice birch tree here, and the first knot is a timber hitch. So really easy. We basically go around the tree, and then with the working end we're just going to wrap back into the tree. So in that space there we go 1, 2, 3, windy, 4, and 5, 6. Basically that's the knot, so you don't have to learn anything more technical than that. All we do then is pull that around the far side of the tree and pull it tight like this, and it's basically a friction hold so that holds nice and tight, and that's snug there. Yeah. So we've got the working end out here that just lays there, and then we've got the ridge line that's going to go this way. And you'll notice I've tied it at about my sort of chest height. We've got a 3 metre square tarp here, so 3 metres by 3 metres. That seems to be the sort of ubiquitous tarp at this point for most people. It gives you a good coverage for 1 or 2 people to camp with, whilst still being relatively packable. So this is the sort of heavier DD hammocks tarp. These are very good, very cheap, and you know that's the sort of pack size that you get out of it. They do a super light version which packs down to about half the size, half the weight, which I really like. I've used that for a couple of years. But there are all kinds on the market as well. At the moment I'm running with a rab tarp, which I've been sort of trialling over winter. So there's all different types, all different specs and everything else. But in general, DD hammocks are a good start up. If you want an introductory one, they're quite cheap. And, they work quite well. Haha. So first hiccup of the day is this tarp's been used as a sailing rig on the canoe recently, so it's not actually set up as nicely as I'd like it. So we'll just rig this up, but that gives me an opportunity to show you how we put a Prusik loop on this tarp as well. So one of the things that you might find quite early if you're trying to learn, especially learning this sort of stuff from a lot of the older books, is that, or from YouTube and TV and that sort of thing, is I noticed quite often this bit was missed. So you'd have all your knots squared away, they'd all be perfect, but your tarp still wouldn't look, you know, brilliant. It'd still be a bit saggy. It's because you need to attach your ridge line to your tarp at either end. Sort of here. So what we do is have what we call a Prusik loop. Just putting that knot there. So what we need is a length of string, and you can tie, so if you're tying a proper Prusik loop for like rock climbing, that sort of thing, you want to do a double fisherman's knot to form the loop. So you could look that up if you like. I like to just do a reef knot with these because it is untieable then. So we've got a little loop and we've got our ridge line. So what we do is we hold our loop on one side, so we've got this little doorway here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the bottom knot through the door once, and through the door twice, and then cinch that down a little bit, and you end up with Prusik. So these are kind of a cool little knot because you can slide them up and down freely like this, bing bing, but then if I tug on the end, it locks in place. It gives you a movable pinch point. And then we'll take the edge of the ridge line. So on most of our course tarps, because we don't want this kind of fiddly bit for most people as their first introduction, we'll tie these on, so these are already prepared. But a little trick you can do is basically pass the lube through the end loop of your tarp there, and then take a stick, preferably one that's not completely rotten. There we go. Oh.
Down. You go.
Mark on there. Yeah, there we go.
Boom.
So we just put that through the Prusik. Alright, so let's come to the other side. What's going on here?
Regretting not checking the tarp.
Yeah. Alright, so another Prusik loop then. So we are going to go, we've got a doorway, so we pass the tail there through the door once, yeah, through the door twice, that, and then if we let that wiggle down tight, it all locks off. And then so the other way to do that, like I said then, rather than having a loop, is to tie the tarp on, so leave your tails free, come back up and just tie a simple shoelace knot, an overhand knot, just like that, and that gives you then the loop. Okay, so we're going to go to the next tree and we'll tie the other knot. So we've got then timber hitch on that side, on this side, there's all kinds of things we can do. All sorts of things. What we want though, the goal, is to have a nice, flat, tight ridge line. So, that's the goal. How you achieve that then is kind of up to you. So like I say, on this primary day where we don't have a lot of time to kind of retain knots, we could teach them to you, but like I say, I'm conscious that people won't remember them when we go home, and I want you to get the maximum amount out today. So what we do on here is we do an old scout knot, which is a round turn and 2 half hitches. So we go around the tree once, like I've done there, keeping this nice and tight, and I'm looking at the ridge line to make sure that's flat. We're going around the tree once, we go around the tree again, so that's our round turn, and then, this is the super simple bit, as we come back and we form this triangle here. Mike's getting that?
Yep, got it.
So we've got this triangle, pinch that corner to keep the triangle, and then all we do is we simply send the working end down there once to form 1 half hitch, and then pinch that again, come over here, and again we've got this little loop to just tie another half hitch. So we could pull that all the way through, but if we just pull it through like that, it leaves us this quick release system in there, so I can pull on that and the whole thing comes undone relatively easily. So that's in the old Baden Powell Scout manual, I think that one, and it's good. You know, that would work perfectly for anybody wanting to set up a tarp. I do slightly different ones personally, just because I find you get a slight bit more tension, it doesn't quite sag so much like that. But like I say, the goal today is to give you a nice setup tarp. So it's not so much about the knots, it's about the end goal of having a reliable roof under which to sleep. Yeah, like that. Alright, so now that we're here, we can position the tarp where we want it. It wants to be kind of over the nice ground. Up this way a little. Just a smidge. Okay, so the third knot is just the corners. And the corners we need pegs for. So when we introduce you to the knife later on today, we'll show you how to make 10 pegs. We've got some ready-made on this course initially.
Please let us know, guys, if the audio's alright on this as you're watching it in the comments. That would be greatly appreciated.
Yes, yes. I could just be talking to nobody at this point. All you've got is microphone.
I know, exactly. Well, Craig and Wandy are on it, so we'll see.
That's cool, yeah, they'll like that. Alright, so when we set the corners out then, we want a little bit of space above the ground, just so we can see all around us and have that sort of immersive experience. So, with the versatility of the tarp, you can either go to a peg or you can go to an anchor that's already existing like a tree. Because I want to show you the peg first, I'm just going to pop round the other side. So we'll go just to that corner and then we'll come back here because there's a tree that we've got there.
I know, yeah. Thanks, Sally. All good on the audio.
All good on the
All
audio.
good.
This, so, here we go then. It's actually got some nice anchors, this.
Yeah, good run.
We'll go to the just to show you. Alright, so I told you that we're not focused on knots here. This is the ultimate in that. So, what I'm looking for with my tarp is the angle that gives me a nice crisp edge on this side, nearest to max, and also that diagonal crease. So if I slack off a bit, you see how that crease disappears?
Yep. There we go.
Yeah, so that's not the best angle, but if I come over here, I get a really strong V pointing right at me.
Let's go closer to that.
Yeah.
Just following the seams along there.
Yeah, excellent.
All the way down.
So once I've got that angle, I then come to the ground. My peg goes diagonally to the top. at about 45 degrees. So what we do is you just clear away some of the undergrowth so we get to a nice solid ground. And I do that neatly so that I can return this once I've put the tarp away, so we don't leave any trace of us being here. So we're going to go steeply towards you, towards the camera, towards the tarp, at about 45 degrees. And what I will say at this point is our pegs don't have any notches on them. So the angle at which you pitch the tarp, the peg, should be sufficient to retain the line, so it shouldn't need a hook to hold it in place. Yeah, so as I tension that, you see it's just pulling down into the peg. We don't need that knot. So I told you we didn't worry about knots today. All we need to do is wrap that around plenty of times, just like that, and that will hold fine.
Nice.
No knots, nice and easy. Alright, so let's go back to the other point then where the tree was, and we'll tie to a tree.
If you don't.
That's nice. So again, I'm looking at those angles on the top, so I want that nice strong V. It's a little difficult to tell if the wind will give me a second. There we go. So that V, that's what I'm looking for. Here's my angle. And here, we've got our branch. So in there, oh look.
Wow. Oh, battery's gone on the camera. Not on the phone though, we're all good.
Oh, okay. Right, we'll keep that going. So, we've got that tree again. So again, with this one, we'll just do that knot that we tied a minute ago. So a round turn and 2 half hitches. 1 half hitch and the second half hitch into there, but we don't pull the end through, we just pull a loop through. So as a general rule, when you're tying knots, as long as you don't pull the end through the knot, you'll have a quick release system. Yeah. So as a general kind of rule for a lot of these knots that we tie, that's a good way to go about it. Don't pull the end through, you can just quick release it as you go. So that's how I would tie onto an anchor that already exists without needing a peg. Excellent. So this next corner, I am going to need one of my pegs for. It's worth bearing in mind at this point, on our primary days, the clients are getting stuck into this, so it's not me waffling on for hours and doing it all. I'll kind of demonstrate the principle and then give you guys the opportunity to go and do it. So I feel like I'm doing a lot of work today. Normally it's kind of a more kind of communal effort, so once I've shown you how the corners work, you get the corners up, you tie your ridge lines and all that thing for yourselves. Alright, so again, another chance to anchor. So we want what would be the same angle, so it would create that central crease. Because we've already pinned out a corner, it's not going to do that for us, so we just want to create a nice back there. And here again, let's spur some good ground, stick the peg in, peg goes into the ground just like that, and the guy line comes over the top. Get it nice and tight, just like that. And then again, all we do is wrap it around lots and lots and lots. It's like I say, the focus of this course is to give you the skills to camp out for a night or two, and these knots would be perfectly sufficient. They'll stay in place for a good 48 hours, no problem. And like I say, we focus on more sophisticated knot work on the itinerant courses. There we go, so that's that line up. We've got one more to do, and that'll be the top set up.
Lovely little spot this. Yeah.
Now then, we've got one of our lovely new planted willow trees, which I don't want to tie to. It's, it might just pop out the ground, it's fine.
Got a nice fallen tree.
Yeah,
A bit further over.
So all this bracket here is excellent material for our shelters to build. I tend to come and collect that. Should hold for today. So this anchor, because I've got all this string here, I could do that round turn in 2 half hitches again, or I could just wrap around a whole bunch of times as with the pegs. So we'll give that a go. Anyway.
So Louise is just asking the pegs that we're using.
Yeah.
What are they, and what species would you normally use? Would you use a particular one?
Yeah. So typically, if I'm just camping out for a single night, the pegs we'd make could just be dead wood off the ground. So fallen branches from any species really that are strong. So if you've got a dead branch that's strong enough that you can kind of manipulate it a bit and it not snap, then you could literally just pop a quick point on the end and use that. That would be the easiest way to go about it. If you want to make nice pegs that you're going to use time and again, or if you're in a place for a long time and you just want to kind of go to the effort of making sort of really good durable pegs that aren't going to snap if the wind picks up unexpectedly, that sort of thing, then I'd suggest using green sticks from trees that grow back quickly. Yeah, so willow is a good example.
Like willow, yeah. Hazel
is another good example. Rowan works quite well as well, especially if you want to make pegs that you take home and use again and again and again. Rowan's a really good solid branch actually, but hazel is just as good. And on the itinerant courses we teach you how to make those sort of pegs that last a long time. So we'll kind of clean them up, make them really fancy, really neat, and we'll bake them in the fire as well to harden them. But that's all kind of extracurricular for the primary days. We just kind of use what's to hand for a simple overnight. Thanks very much. What was her name? Louise, was that?
Louise, yeah.
Thanks, Louise.
Good question.
Good question. Alright, so this is the top setup. Is it perfect? Not quite. So, purposefully high on this corner, just to show you that if it was to rain heavily here, you've got this kind of bucket effect going on. There's a couple of ways we could avoid that. We could lower this corner, yeah, to just make the roof nice and even. Or we could actually lower still that far corner there, and it would create a funnel down into this corner here to run the water off. Now that's quite a nice thing to do that. I tend to have asymmetrical setups when I set my tops, just slightly. And again, this is kind of going a bit more nuanced that we might do in an introductory course. But I'm aware that some people are watching that have been on our primary courses, maybe thinking of coming on the itinerant courses. So that slight asymmetry, it gives you rain runoff. So rather than it running off kind of evenly distributed across the whole top, it allows it to run off in a single corner. And it might be that you want to do that so you can collect that water into your water bottle to then make drinking water. Or it might be that, as today, we've got the wind coming in strongly towards my faces, so I'm facing into the wind. It might be that I want to pin a corner down into the wind to allow the top to throw it over me. And in which case then I might have this corner higher just to give me more of an open field. So rather than closing the corners down on all sides, one of the benefits of the top is that you can be versatile and work with nature rather than against it, and see which way the wind's coming at you, protect yourself in that way, but allow the sort of view to open up on the other side. So that's the tops. So like I say, this primary day is to give you an introduction. So we've got a top set up, we could live under here now, we could set the camp up, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in terms of what we use to camp overnight.
Have a look at the finished product.
Yeah, you want to skip back?
Yeah, I'll take a walk back.
I'll start to get the scale. This is a 3 metre by 2 metre tower.
Huge living space. Really good. And about 90% of the time we'd choose to sleep under this setup as well, wouldn't we? It's just one of the nicer ways.
So only really if we're kind of in adverse weather conditions that we might put some different setups.
Yeah.
This gives you the maximum floor space, the maximum sort of livability. So this is using modern materials. The next thing we're going to look at is natural materials. So whether you've accidentally gone down the wrong valley on a day hike and you've not got a top with you and you need a shelter for the night, or it might be you want to spend a night in the woods in a natural shelter, just to again have that sort of connectivity with nature, and it's a lovely way to sleep out. It's really kind of insular, it's really warm in those shelters, and they don't take too much effort to build. Alright, so we've looked at modern tarps to get set up. like I say, it might be that you want to camp out in a natural shelter, so build something for yourself. It might be that you find yourself in a situation where you need to. So it might be that, yeah, you know, you've taken a wrong turn on a hike and you're not going to get back to the car before nightfall, and you think it's sensible to just camp out for the night. So we'll talk later about the sort of things that we carry in a day pack, even when we're not anticipating camping out overnight, just to kind of help with those things. But in terms of building a shelter out of natural materials, then one principle I would urge people follow on most of my courses is to not cut anything. So just use sticks and branches that you find naturally on the ground. You know, if you're going to go to the effort of bringing, you know, cutting down green sticks and that sort of thing, you might as well use a modern shelter, in my opinion. So we try wherever possible to use just dead fallen branches. We have some poles cut for our courses because we use them over and over and over again. It makes more sense for us to have green poles cut that we can use again, rather than completely denuding the forest of dead wood. So we'll have some green poles, but in general, you probably, if you're in a situation where you need to build one, my old microphone, where you need to build one of these shelters, you might well not have anything. So we teach it in a way that requires no tools as well, just so that if you do find yourself in a situation where you don't have anything and you need to build something with just your hands, you should be able to do that here. So there'd be no string, no binding of any kind, and no tools, just picking stuff up and organising it into a shelter. The first one we look at then is the most simple and practical shelter, in my opinion. It's just a simple one-person lean-to. So for this, you'll need one anchor point, so a tree, and a bit of ground that you're happy to lay down on. So what I typically do when I'm looking to build a shelter is I'll have in my mind the shelter I'm going to build. I'll then actually lay down on the ground and make sure it's somewhere where I want to camp. There's nothing worse than building a shelter and then realising you can't camp there. That works okay for me. That ground's not too bad. There's a little bump here, but that's actually working to benefit my hip. And I've actually got a rock there. Is that a rock? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I've got a boulder pillar. There you go. So we're going to build here. So that's where I want my shelter to be. So what I need is one long pole and one fork. So the reason I like this shelter is very, very minimal. It's one long pole and one fork stick. Proper Blue Peter style now. Here's one that we had ready. So fork stick about chest height is good. A little bit short and your shelter will be a little bit low for comfort, and too tall in it the shelter just becomes unwieldy, and if anything a bit oversized. So about chest height is good actually. So this one is just slightly larger than that. But basically we're going to lean the shelter against this tree. So this is our ridge pole. So just a long strong pole, as straight as we could find. That's basically going to form sort of like what the ridge line does on the top, the point of the shelter, the apex of the roof. So I lay that in the place where I want to camp. So I've sort of laid down and made my assessed where my bed's going to go. So that's where I kind of want to be, just there. And what we're going to do is basically build the roof on my side of this pole, right? So we're going to lean everything against this pole, and all the weight is going to go that way in front of me. So what I want to do is put the stick on this side of the tree, so that all the weight that we lean into this is going to lean into the tree. If I put it on that side and then fork it up here and lean everything in, you know, we're just putting strain on a fork stick that could snap. It might fall over. So you just get the maximum benefit really of using the tree to your full advantage. So putting it on this side of the tree, and then the fork, all the fork is doing essentially is stopping the shelter from falling down the tree. So it stops it from sliding vertically down, that's all. So it doesn't need to put too much force into the pole towards the tree, because all the weight of the thatching and everything's going to do that. So the only thing it's doing is stopping the pole falling down. So we put it on the same side as the pole, on this side of the tree, and into the shelter. And the reason we do that again is if I put it on the outside here and we load the shelter up, there's a chance the whole arrangement could fall over that way. So what we do is put it on this side of the pole here and lock that in nice and strong, just like that. And that's basically the entire structure of the shelter. That should be strong enough to hold your weight. So if it's not, have a look at what's slipping, what you need to assess, and where it's moving about. I think that's just the pole on the back side there slipping.
What's slipping?
It's just this fork,
yeah.
So the fork's sliding down. So is it naturally going to stop? Yes. Is that enough space for me? It's quite small. So we might just see if we can put that pole up a little bit further. There we go. It's worth pointing out just for the camera as well, all this stuff on here is from my dead branch. I'm not damaging the tree here. Yeah, so it's worth doing that because all the weight of your shelter is going to do that for you anyway. It's just worth checking. There we go. A quick adjustment on the back. I've got my roof. At this point, I want to lay down and make sure I'm going to fit inside my shelter. And obviously this all becomes a bit more obvious once you know what I'm going to build. But for me, I know the roof's going to go here. I'm going to go sort of in the shelter, something like that.
Pan out.
Yeah.
Just going to show you guys lying underneath, making sure you've got enough room. So we're quite tall, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we need to make sure.
One of the issues that we find is that trying to find one of these sticks, these long poles naturally occurring in the woods, long enough for somebody as tall as me and Max, is often quite tricky actually. So there is a trick you can do to maximise your toe space, because otherwise I'm going to be in a bit of a fetal position, and I quite like to stretch out. So one trick we can do is just hire the toe box of the shelter with a log or a couple of logs. So instead of going to the ground, we can just start to build up that point there and get that to go around. So 3 logs is quite a good setup. If I go and get another one. So we start to kind of raise the toe box up, so that if I lay down again, my toes are now inside the shelter.
So you might not be able to hear him, guys, but basically just propping the end up so his feet are clearing the ridgepole that you can see there. And then,
go this way a little bit more,
yeah, but nice and comfortable, and your feet aren't touching.
That's it. So that's just a tip, and you know, if it comes to it, you could just curl your legs up a little bit, so you're fine. But it's just something we found worked quite well. So once I've done that, I then need to make the footprint of the shelter so that I know the space that I want to sleep in is available. So I tend to oversize it by sort of 8 to 10 inches. And if I lay these sticks down just so you've got a visual there. If I'm laid in this shelter, yeah, so I'm just making that footprint so I know I've got somewhere safe to sleep. Then we start thatching it. And again, at this point, it's really beneficial to have 10 people on the course because they can all get stuck in. So basically, we put the foot of every stick on that line and then lay it up to the ridgepole. And that way it's nice and neat. And it shouldn't take much effort really. So we've clearly got these branches just knocking around from previous shelters. A lot of the time when you're building a natural shelter is taken up with just collecting the materials. So if you're doing this in a situation where you've not got a lot of time before dark and you might need this shelter, you might be building the shelter into the dark, it might be worthwhile collecting all of your sticks while it's light. So going out while you've got the light, gathering all the materials here and then building, because you can always build in the dark, but the very worst thing to do would be to wander off looking for some extra sticks and not be able to find yourself your way back to the shelter in the dark. So like I say, we're not going to build full shelters today just because it's me and Max, and we basically take an hour just laying sticks and twigs on things, but I'll put enough on here just so you get an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. What we're doing is essentially trying to make a flat roof. So as best as possible, we want one plane, one flat flat plane basically, all the way down. So if we've got bits sticking in and sticking out, it lofts the space and it means that you kind of have this inefficient roof, lots of pockets in it to let water through and let heat escape. So what I'm focusing on, not so much about keeping these all nice and perpendicular, although it's always good to be neat. It is this flatness that's important, and quite often you'll find, especially with larch poles, is that they're bent, so I tend to lay those ones on horizontally a bit more, just so that they lay flat rather than sagging into the shelter. But we just build this up and you just take your time basically. There's no rush. It's quite an enjoyable process. You want to be efficient with your energy as well. If you are accidentally overnighting, it might be that you're getting hungry, so you don't want to burn all your calories just gathering sticks in a big old hurry. So take your time, be nice and slow, nice and relaxed, and you know you're going to have a nice warm place to sleep. But we would basically carry on like that until we're ready to put the leaves on.
Just trying to show you as well, guys, how flat it actually looks. Just show you from this angle.
Block off that back corner as well. So yeah, like I say, those bent sticks that would normally sag into the shelter, if you put those on top of a nice straight pole, it holds it out of your shelter and keeps it nice and flat. So this is one of the shelters that we might use to build. It's quite, like I say, it's quick and easy. That's the point. So very little in terms of large structural poles. You're just looking for basically one good pole. So if you're stuck in the woods, you just want one good long pole, as long as you can find it, that's strong, and then you just need one fork. So that's the kind of benefit of that. And you just keep building it up until you've got enough sticks in place to then put leaves on top, and we would just throw loads of leaves. So I might, I'll tell you what, let's pause the live stream for 10 minutes and me and Max will just get stuck in and come back when we've got a bit more of a shelter built, and you'll see the sort of close to the finished product. Okay. Welcome back, folks. One of the reasons why we like to use a bandana is it speeds things up. You can carry a lot at once, but don't let us deceive you. We've done this quickly because we had a dismantled shelter right next door. You could expect to spend maybe an hour or two collecting all this material to thatch your shelter with. Put that on top. One of the reasons why there's always a couple of bandanas in my outfit. Yeah, so what we've done is just basically grabbed forest debris. So all the stuff that's on the ground, we've piled up, and we basically started at the bottom and worked our way up to the top. And that's quite important. It basically allows the water to run off in a predictable way. So start at the bottom, just like you're sort of laying a line of bricks. Go all the way along the bottom of your shelter and work your way up to the top. And basically the idea with this is to just keep doing it for as long as you can. The more stuff you put in here, the more protective your shelter will be, and the better insulated you'll be as well. So you can see from this you know represents for a single person maybe 2 hours of work, something like that. So it's not too much effort, but there's a lot of nuance involved. So being here with us on the day course, we can discuss things like which way is the wind blowing. So it's quite difficult to represent that in the video, and obviously we're building this for camera today, so we tried to pick a place that's got the best shot. But you can see all the leaves are blowing towards you, so any wind coming past this shelter will blow over and around, so we'll have a nice pocket of air there. And what we emphasise on the course really is that the way these shelters work is to cut out the factors of heat loss. So for hypothermia, you basically want to focus on 3 of the 5 factors. So you've got conduction, convection and evaporation. Yeah. So what we want to do is, first of all, if we think about conduction, we want to be off the floor. So in my pack again, when we look at the equipment for any day sack that I'm carrying, whether it's for a couple of hours hike or for a week out, there's always half a roll mat in there, and it's got a few different uses, but one of them is that I've always got something to sleep on. If you didn't have that, it's quite easy to replicate. We've got all the bracken over where we put the tarp up, all that dead bracken, it's nice and dry. We could just pile and pile and pile and pile and pile that on the ground to make it really, really deep, and then when we lay on it, it all squashes down, but at least it gets you off the damp ground a little bit. That would be one of the ways that we could look at doing that. One of the other things then, like I say, so that's conduction. Convection, well, we've thought about which way the wind's going. So the wind's blowing over the shelter, so there should be, hopefully, once we finish blocking it off here, a nice pocket of non-moving air, so a pocket of still air, so you don't get that cooling effect. And the way I get people to think about that if they want is if you blow on the back of your hand, it feels cool. That's purely because you've got air moving across your hand. So if you block that out, you stop that cooling. And by blocking that out, it also dramatically decreases the evaporative effect. So if you're wet, if you got wet in the day, or if you're sweating, if you're in there and there's no air circulating around, your evaporative heat loss will be diminished quite a lot as well. This shelter, as we built it so far, is basically designed to work at its best with a fire as well. So we could lay in here now. I'll do that for you. Yep, so you would lay up under there on my little boulder pillow, and I'd have a small little twig fire here, maybe a bundle of firewood that I can just keep adding it to, and you can get through a night like that. Okay.
Let's get a shot.
Yeah.
Full length. Nice.
Yeah. So one of the other reasons why we pitched it with the wind is that any rain that's carried into the woods at this time will be blown with that wind over the shelter, and I'll get a bit of a rain shadow as well, a bit more protection. However, if I was unable to light a fire, or perhaps it's winter and it's really, really cold, and you've not been able to get a fire, or if it's raining really heavily, all you would do is build another roof just like this one on the other side and create what would be a kennel essentially, and we'd have a slightly bigger space to sleep in, and we'd completely block it off with just a little hole to crawl in and out of. And I've spent several nights out at about -5 when I was sort of 20 years old in a shelter just like that with no sleeping bag, and I just made a really good effort of building the shelter over a couple of days, and yeah, it was a good way to camp out. So on the primary days, this is basically the shelter we focus on, because like I say, it's just for an overnight, so you're just here for a single night, maybe two. You just want something to keep the rain off, somewhere to sit as well, perhaps out of the rain. You oversize it a little bit, just go a little bit higher. You can potentially oversize that, sit by the fire and have somewhere to sleep. So this is the shelter that we focus on the primary course. We look at a couple of different kinds on our weekend course on the itinerant. Me and Max will have a couple set up already, and then the clients will have the opportunity to build one for themselves and sleep out in it. So when we do the weekend courses, that's an option. But for the primary day, this sort of shelter is pretty good to build. It's quite easy. Doesn't require any particular practice. You just have to be careful in those early stages to make sure your structure you can sleep inside of. So lots of checking to make sure you're not shrinking your sleeping space too much. Yeah. So that's.
Josh has just made a good point. So he likes to take a cheap poncho with him to use as a liner underneath the debris, even just.
Absolutely. Yeah. So building on those kind of basic principles. So how can I sleep in this with nothing? And then absolutely, you then make use of what you have got with you at the time. So having a poncho or a poncho liner. In my kit, like I say, I've got that foam roll mat, and I'll usually have, if nothing else, an orange emergency bivvy bag. But typically if I'm expecting to camp out, obviously I have a sleeping bag and a proper bivvy bag and that sort of thing. But we'll cover that a bit later on today, I think. So that's the shelter section part done of the day. On the primary course, that all happens well before lunch. We'll move on to a knife session now, so we'll introduce you to the Bushcraft knife and do some basic carving skills, getting set up towards lunch. So in real time, it's about 11:15 for me and Max today on the live stream. So I think we'll probably squeeze in that knife session for you next, and then we'll go and prepare our lunch as well. So you get to watch us eat lunch. All right. I think we could. How are we doing on battery and that sort of thing, Max?
Let's have a little look. I'd have to finish it to find out.
Okay. Well, let's keep running. I think we'll just move straight onto the knife section. Yeah.
I'm plugged in as well, anyway.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Yeah, like I say, we're figuring out this live streaming business as we go today. So I'm glad you can join us along. Let's head back to base. So one of the things that we keep going at base camp is we'll have this established structure, so there's always somewhere dry to hang out, even if it's chucking it down. And quite often we'll have double this capacity, so we'll put a second tarp up, so there's loads of dry space for you, your equipment, and we'll have the kettle on as always. And what we typically have is an equipment table set up for the course, and then we'll have an admin table set up where people can kind of grab some snacks and make drinks and do all the cooking and that sort of thing. But because it's just me and Max today, we've just got this kind of even more minimalist setup. So let's pop the coffee cups away. We'll leave my phone there. We're basically bouncing between Max's and my phone today, making sure we've got batteries to do it for you. Because live streaming, we've found out, kills the battery.
Yeah.
Which is no surprise really when you think we're like bouncing information up to like a satellite and then back down to everybody. Alright, so like I say, forgive me if I'm a little disjointed in these in this live stream. I'm usually interacting with people, and that sort of conversational aspect of the courses is, for one thing, really nice, and we tend to get a lot more information out because people are asking us questions. But also it means that I'm not just running a script all the way through the day, and I can kind of actually have a real interaction. So after we've done the shelter session, then like I say, we come on to the knives. So the first thing I would do is basically talk about what to look for. Like I say, if you're new to bushcraft, there's a lot of information out there about knives, about equipment. There's 1,000 people trying to sell you stuff, so trying to cut through that sort of marketing stuff in order to get legitimate kind of genuine information can sometimes be tricky. So what I'll say right at the top of that is that we do sell these knives, but this is not a marketing plug. You can buy these knives from a million other places, so just so that you don't think I'm sort of cloak and dagger in it, I do sell these knives. The reason I sell these knives is these are the ones that for the last what year are we in? The last 7 years since setting Howl up, these are the knives that I've been using. So I sell them because they're the knives that we have in stock for the courses. These are the ones that we genuinely use. That all aside though, let's get to the actual information. So don't worry about whether you're going to buy one of these or not. It's just the information that I want to pass on. So we recommend this particular type of knife if you're starting bushcraft for a few reasons really. One, they're really cheap. So they're about £20 or less for a knife like that. So they're also really easy to sharpen. So they come with a Scandinavian bevel. So the Scandi grind basically is this single change in a bevel. So you've got this flat section here, there's one angular change right the way to the sharp edge, and it's about 22 degrees, 22, 23 degrees. So you get what's called a Scandi grind. It's essentially a flat bevel in the knife. A couple of reasons why that's good. One is for sharpening. So another reason why these knives are good because they're cheap is that you'll wreck a knife far quicker learning to sharpen it than you will wreck it ever using it in the woods. So having something that's easy to maintain, easy to sharpen, and that flat bevel is quite good for that. But the flat bevel is also really good for wood carving. So basically as you come to slice through the wood, that flat sharp edge sits on the wood and supports the cutting edge. There's some really good videos on YouTube actually from the Moriniv channel, from Yogi Sundqvist, who's this kind of world famous Swedish carving instructor, and he carves spoons and bowls and all that sort of thing. Absolutely incredible instructor, and those videos are those sorts of videos that you can just sit with a coffee and watch for the joy of them, but you do learn a lot as well. But he talks about knives a little bit in that video as well, so check that out. But yeah, basically it's a Scandinavian grind, so it's easy to maintain and good for carving green wood, which is mostly what we do. It's also about the width of my palm, which biometrically that's kind of a good size, so you don't get too much leverage at the tip, which is hard on your wrist, but also it is long enough to do some of those other tasks. Mostly what we do on the itinerant courses, to be fair, things like battening, that sort of thing. It gives you that length that you might need rather than a smaller craft knife. These ones we use the more heavy duty, So rather than the robust, which I don't like very much for the shape of the blade and all that sort of thing, the wind's kicking up there. I like the heavy duties. They're basically the companions, but they're thicker, so they're stronger for that sort of stuff. And what we do with our coarse knives is I grind the back of these back at Howl HQ, so that you can use them with a fire steel. So if you buy them from from a shop, they'll have a slightly rounded back. They're not very good for a fire steel, but I grind the back of these to make them functional with a fire steel, and that's one of the reasons why I sell them on the shop as well. But like I say, so it's a good palm size, so you get kind of good biometrics there, and it's got a good grippy rubberized handle. There's not too much of a guard there, so it doesn't interrupt any of the grips that you might want to use on the knife. But it does mean that with it being asymmetrical, if I grab this knife without looking, so let's say I'm working in the dark, I know just by feel which way around in my hand that knife is. I don't have to look at it, and that's quite a valuable little thing to have. It also comes in a good solid plastic sheath, so you're not going to cut through that or anything like that. But like I say, they're the ones that we use on the courses. If you're looking for a recommendation off me, that would be the knife that I'd recommend for bushcraft. What I will say though is that in the UK these are not what's considered legal carry. So basically in the UK, if you want to carry a knife in your pocket just kind of every day, you need a knife that's smaller than 3 inches in blade length and folds without a lock. I'll have an example of that in my rucksack later. But basically think of a Swiss Army knife, something that folds open, it's a small blade, but there's no lock in place. Anything outside of that, you need justification for carrying it. So that might be if it's in the bottom of your rucksack and you're out backpacking, you might consider that good reason to have it with you. But it's just something to research for yourselves. So we always recommend that clients go home and look at gov.uk to see that first-hand information. You make a judgment for yourself about that sort of thing. But that's the advice. So these are the knives we're going to be using on the course. There's a few safety things then. So obviously we're on a live stream here, so you're not actually here with me in the woods, and I don't have to look after you firsthand. But just a couple of tips, if it's something you're thinking about getting into to keep yourself safe when you're on your own, would be that I always keep the knife on my belt so that I'm not putting it on the ground. I'm not going to accidentally stand on it and break it, or stand on it and cut myself or somebody else that I'm with. If you leave your knife on a log that you've been working on while you go and grab your coffee, your friend might not know it's there and they'll sit on it and cut it. So always knives go back in the sheath. So that's a good tip. The other thing that we do is we employ netball rules when we're in the woods. It basically means if you've got the knife in your hand, you're not allowed to move your feet. So it only takes one step to trip, and it only takes one trip to skewer yourself. So if the knife's in your hand, plant your feet. It might be overkill for a lot of people. I'm not here to give blanket advice to everybody, but if you're new to this and you're wanting some kind of hard and fast rules to get started with, if you've got your knife in your hand, don't move your feet. Yeah. Other things then, just be considerate around other people. Make sure people know that you're carving. If you're camping with friends, seat yourself in a place where you're really visible and obvious, so they're not going to bump into you and knock your arm or something like that. But we kind of cover that in more detail, and as people are carving in the woods, they sort of see how we manage the group, and then they can use that information in kind of a meta sense to how they might manage themselves. Alright, so enough waffle. That's the knife. Any knife that you're comfortable with though, to be honest, whether it's an opinel, and I like one of those, or a Swiss Army knife, whatever it is, just keep yourself safe in using that, and use whatever you're comfortable with. So we need to do some carving, so I'm going to grab a stick. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I'll stand out here actually, Max, just in the light a bit, and I've got a bit more room to manoeuvre. So I've got this green piece of willow that we cut ready for the course, so I'll use that. What we're going to do, the way that we couch this kind of introduction to knife skills in the primary courses, is the first thing we get people doing as the first introduction is make a stick to make a kebab over the fire. So we have kebabs for the lunch on this course, so that can be salami, or it can be vegetable kebabs, but it's just a really good simple way to get familiar with the knife. So if you're new to knife skills, or if you've got children, Peeling sticks essentially is just a really good way to hammer in those fundamentals. And even if people have done lots of carving before, typically find that in the fundamental use of the knife, there's always room for improvement with anybody. I'd include myself in that as well. But you would typically get a stick like this, a willow, and what we want to do is peel it, make it nice and smooth and thin, and put a point on the end ready for putting a kebab over the fire. So I'll show you how we do that. The first thing I want to do is get rid of this fork here so I can just throw a point. So we're going to start to carve. So what we do is we hold the knife in a forehand grip. So that's a nice strong grip with my thumb wrapped all around. And it's quite common to see people carving like this when they first learn. And what it does is it sort of gives you a feel of support. You can kind of push with your thumb a bit. It feels supportive. What you'll find is if you do that for long enough, you'll get a blister along your thumb. And also, you basically sticking your thumb out like that. As you carve, you're going to hyperextend your forearm muscles up here. So by doing that, you can feel the tension in the arm there, and it basically contributes to things like tennis elbow and that sort of thing. But in a sort of practical sense, you'll tire your arm out really quickly. So what we do is you have a good solid grip all the way around. Apologies for the states of my hands as well in this video. Like everybody, I've been adhering strictly to the hand washing regime that is really valuable, and I recommend people do it. I'm not saying don't, but I need some moisturiser. If somebody can help, please. Yeah, so I'm covered in little cuts and broken skin, so I do apologise for that. So here we go. We're going to start to carve. I've got my good solid grip, and we'll just start to carve initially like this, going all the way around the stick, making little cuts. Yeah, so by making lots of little cuts rather than a few big cuts, you'll save your arm. You'll not tire out too quickly. And we just go around and around and around the stick like that in these little cuts. Yeah, just pushing through, and eventually it'll go through. So no energy at all, but what I am doing is carving from my shoulder. So I'm actually engaging all of my arm muscle in this, not just my wrist. I'm pushing with my whole arm, so I'm using those bigger muscles to carve that off like that. Yep. I'm also carving off to the side of my body, so maybe if Max pans out a little bit, you'll see I'm actually carving out here. Yep. So the reason we do that, again, because this is the arm that's doing that sort of forward action, it frees that arm up to fully push all the way from the big muscle groups, even engaging my back in that. I can sort of feel it from my shoulder and cut. Clearly overkill for this size, but if we talk about learning fundamentals and about getting yourself into good habits right from the beginning, if your just default is to carve there, it then doesn't matter whether you're carving something this size or something much bigger. It's just your comfortable habitual default to cut from there. So I tend to cut off to the side for that reason. So we're starting to get a point on there now. That's quite good. We also want to take the bark off. So lots of people think you need to take the bark off of sticks that you're going to cook over the fire with for safety, like maybe there's germs and bacteria on the stick. And that might well be true, but we're going to put that over the fire and essentially kill anything that's on here. The reason I take bark off is for the taste. So a lot of the sort of volatile oils and that sort of thing in the branch will be in the bark, and particularly willow, it's got salicylic acid in it, so which is what we kind of derive aspirin from. So you can actually use it as a wild medicinal for a bit of kind of an analgesic, but we don't want that in our food. So what we want to do is take the bark off, and the way we do that is just slice down the wood. And this is where that Scandinavian bevel really comes in. So if Max can see that, the bevel, the sharp edge is sat flat on the stick, and it just runs down. So I'm not having to manage a fine edge by kind of this sort of thing. I can just let the knife sit flat, and I can run the stick along it like that. Yeah, like I say, so if you're new to carving, or if you've got children that are wanting to do this, peeling sticks is super satisfying if you get these long ribbons off, but it's also really good just to hammer home those fundamentals of holding the knife and running it down. We don't get very much more technical with that on the primary course. If obviously people are here and they've got experience, then we can tailor that as we go. So somebody here on a primary day that's done a bunch of carving before, we can finesse the skills and obviously chat to them one-to-one through the group and build that up. But for us, on the primary day, as long as you peeled a stick like this, and we see good form, so you're holding the knife properly and using it like this, then that's good enough for us. Yeah. So what I'll do then, once I've got the bark off, is we'll just start to refine that a little bit and make it thin enough to house our food. So we're going to cook on here with this. So we run the knife down. And so again, what I'm doing, I'm carving right close to my hand as well. So another thing that people quite often do, will carve up here, and you get this sort of flicking action, which is, that's okay, you know, you'll get there. But in terms of efficiency, it's much better to hold the stick close to your hand and do these long sliding strokes. You get much more control, again, because there's not as much leverage on your wrist. It's quite a pivot around my thumb, whereas there, not so much. So keeping it locked to the hand. It also means I can sort of use my finger as a bit of a guide, a bit of a brace. So I get again, more control as we go down. The other thing with these knives that I highlight, if people are getting along with it really well, is there's one thing you can do to, again, maximise the efficiency of the edge. And so these are shaving sharp, these knives. Me and Max did a Instagram story not that long ago where we sharpened all these. So it's really, really sharp, this edge. But I can put my finger on there and press somewhat hard and not cut myself. Yeah. But you can all viscerally imagine what I do if I push and then slide my finger across that knife. Yeah, Max has had the same reaction. I'm sure all of you would have. That you can use to your benefit when carving. So if I'm carving, let's say I'm carving a point on there, and we're going to just push like that, I'm having to push pretty much, you know, getting close to full strength there, going through that, to just push through at that first bit. But if I use that method of actually, like, let's see if we can get a slice going. If I slice through there, so much easier. Beautiful. And I can fling peelings off at Max.
That's who missed my head by about an inch. Yeah.
I've got a pretty decent aim now. But yeah, so using that slicing action, so slice through the wood, allow the knife to slip through the wood in that controlled way, much easier to carve with then, like that. Yeah, so this slicing action, so really efficient. All right, so just get the rest of the bark up there. So you can see, once you get used to it, you can be quite fast actually and quite controlled. And although sometimes it might look a bit chaotic because I'm going fast, everything is just muscle memory then at that point. I'm not having to think about other things. It sort of becomes like driving a car or riding a bike. If you really concentrate early on getting good form and practicing good form from the start, it becomes second nature, and then you never have to think about it again. Unless you want to be a bushcraft instructor, and then you have to think about it
day and night,
crucially, so that you can coach people. But yeah, there we go. So something like that, you know, it's enough to get some bits of food on there. There's already a point on this other end, but we could put a point in there as well. So that slicing action. I've got my kebab stick. So that's one of the things that we make on the course. It might seem, you know, really basic, you know, the idea that you're on a course and we're just getting you to peel a stick and put a point in it, but that's not the point, if you excuse the pun. The point is that, you know, we're coaching you through those knife skills so that you get a really good technique early on, so that you can then develop yourselves with that then, and you'll need less input as you go forwards. So that's one of the things we do with the knives. We would then start to look at lunch, so we do some lunch prep with the same knives. Yep, so we'll be slicing up some of that salami, some of the halloumi, that sort of thing. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a little break now, and me and Max will get our fire built back up. We'll do our own lunch prep. It's currently getting the fire back going again, ready for us to cook some lunch. We need some coals on there to roast some stuff, and I'm off to the stream. So we're lucky enough to have a fresh stream running past our camp, which we take all of our water from the courses, so you're actually drinking wild water whilst you're here with us rather than tap water. We run it through a lifesaver jerry can, which will take out everything including viruses. There we go. Yes, I'm heading down to the stream, not for water but for some wild edibles. So it's that time of year. We have got the classic of wild food that most people start with when they want to start eating from nature, and that is ramsons, wild garlic. So yeah, it grows in nice kind of wet ground. You can see all the green there down by the stream. There are maybe one look-alike, a plant called Lily of the Valley, which has got a beautiful bell-like flower at certain times of the year. Oh, but it also has leaves that are not dissimilar to these. So it's always worth knowing your plants and knowing how to 100% identify them. But with these, let's get an example there. You can see they grow from sort of one point, so they all grow in these little clumps like that. And they've got these beautiful long tapered leaves, and the real indicator really is if you smell it. So let's spin you back around to me. Oh, look, it smells like garlic. Really strong. It's a beautiful plant. It's got little white flowers which are excellent in salads, or these little young shoots here. These are beautiful as a salad plant. Just eat those. So I'm going to harvest some of these, and we're going to use them to make some food parcels to roast some halloumi. So I'll catch back up with you in a bit, and we'll put some of that on the fire. Welcome back. We're pretty swift actually, faster than half an hour, isn't it? Yeah. You might have just caught my last video as I went down to the stream to get the ramsons. So I'm just going to show you like a quick and easy way to do some wild cooking really. So obviously we rely on kind of billy cans and that sort of thing. So we've got these classic Zebra 14 centimeters, also available on howlbushcraft.com, but not to sell you them, but they are good. So we obviously rely those for like a modern equivalent to cook with. But you don't have to try very hard to be able to cook without pots and pans. It saves on the washing up, and you can find some cool natural flavours as well. One of the things I like to do is cook with leaves. So what I've made here is a little halloumi parcel with the ramsons that I collected. Now ordinarily I wouldn't be using this, we'd use some brambles or something, but we're kind of a bit conscious on time with these videos, so we're just trying to crack through now. So rather than spending another 15 minutes processing some brambles, we just add some string, so we're going to use a string. And that'll burn off almost immediately. So as I put that in the fire, it'll burn off pretty much straight away, but it'll hold together long enough that the leaves protect the halloumi inside and allow that to warm up and cook a little bit. And hopefully the leaves will impart some flavour as well. So if you're not too hot with foraging and you're not sure about maybe using wild plants for that sort of thing, a good one that you can find in the shops is cabbage. You just bring a cabbage out with you. There's loads and loads of leaves in one cabbage head, and they're really durable actually on the fire, so you could use that to wrap some food and roast it on the embers. I quite like making like little meatballs, so bring some mince, or some minced rabbit in particular is very nice. Mince that up with some salt, pepper, all that sort of thing. Max is salivating. I'm
a vegetarian and I'm salivating, oh my god.
But yeah, make some little bundles basically, and pop it in the cabbage leaves. And to be honest, you can kind of just plonk them on the embers, you know, a couple of cabbage leaves as a cradle, but I quite like to wrap them up just to keep all the soot and everything out. So the way I'm doing this is, and you don't need me to teach you this, but basically, yeah, you know, you just wrap it up like you wrap a parcel. All I would say with natural leaves is they've got a natural curve, they want to bend this way, so I'm going to use that to wrap like that, rather than trying to wrap it that way and the stem snapping and things. So use the underside, we fold it in that way, and then we take another one and just go the other way. And you know what, you could probably put 3 or 4 of these on each one, just to give it that extra protection whilst the halloumi cooks. The benefit of doing this as well, so one of the reasons why we do this on the primary day is we are aware that, you know, it might be quite new to people, and you know, we might be a little short on time as well. So we try to offer foods that it's not that big of a deal. You know, if we don't cook it all the way through, it's not like we're working with raw chicken or anything here. If the halloumi is not quite cooked all the way through, it's still halloumi, isn't it? So again, that's why we use salami. But that's also a good tip if you're wanting to camp out for the first time and you are a bit nervous about cooking on the fire. If you bring food that you're not going to, you know, poison yourself with if you mess up the cooking a little bit, then you're going to have a happier time. So things like, or easy things, so things like rice, pasta, boiling an egg, or vegetarian food where it's just vegetables that, hey, you're just going to pan fry it for a few minutes and then eat it. if you kind of get your fire wrong the first time and you're having a bit of a nightmare, it doesn't matter if your bell peppers are a little al dente, you can sort of get by. So, you know, it's just good advice for people who are new to it. We'll leave those parcels there for now. I'll get Max to help me make the rest of them. With the kebabs, I'm just going to thin that stick off a little bit. You'll notice I use the same knife for food prep as I do for woodwork. We're not working with any woods that I'm worried with today, so I'm not doing anything with this knife that isn't, you know, already food safe. I'm not hacking up a load of yew trees or something like that, which are poisonous. You know, and I'm going to use this stick for my food anyway. But the point is that all this food's going on the fire, so the fire will sterilise everything and cook it all. If I was maybe slicing a salad that we weren't going to cook, then I'll have the opinals. We use the opinals as our sort of camp kitchen knives for that. So, what have we got for my kebab? I might risk a mushroom.
Ooh, splitter.
Splitter. Should we see? I can't remember. We figured out which way around it was. I thought it was up the stem.
Well, the spores are going upward, aren't they?
The stick's a bit thick. Hey, not bad. Look at that.
That'll do.
This is my kebab anyway. I only need 3 of those. Now we've got some bell pepper. Love bell peppers. I spent some time working in the kitchen once. You want to know the fastest way to prepare bell pepper?
Do it.
Done.
What?
Seedless. Yeah.
What?
And then I like to just rip them. It gives you a better edge, rustic look. Yeah.
I'm not sure what I've just witnessed. That was amazing.
Yeah. For all my bushcraft skills, I'm actually a culinary genius. There you go. Bell peppers, leave them really big. Oversize them so that they don't, because they do tend to split a little bit. So oversize them and just bosh it on. Like I say, we'd have salami as well, so sticking some salami on there. I did want to get some nice big tomatoes, but things are as they are. We're having to work with what we can get. So just being a bit more ginger with the tomato. Ooh. There we go. So a couple more pieces for me. Max can sort himself out once he stopped filming. You might be thinking we could try the halloumi in this way. We've found that halloumi pretty much just falls apart when you put it on the kebabs. So that's why we bring the cabbage leaves at different times of year. We use the halloumi, the ramsons where we can. But simple kebab, no washing up. That goes next to the fire, and we'll put the halloumi on the fire when the embers have baked down a bit. But because I'm hungry, I'm going to eat my kebab while I wait for my halloumi to cook. That's just going to go there. Quite a high heat, yeah. Sort of less than 5 seconds. I can keep my hand there and get that nice and cooked. There's no washing up though. That's the benefit, right? Yeah. So that's why we want to cook in this way. It gives you a good introduction to thinking a bit differently about how you feed yourself outdoors. It gives you, where we can, you know, an opportunity to try wild food. If not, wild food methods like using cabbage leaves. And we might boil some potatoes as well, because who don't like potatoes? Potato. Okay guys, so the rams and parcels are parcelled. What we've done is we've built a fire that we've basically built horizontal, so we've got all these embers now, which are just the coals. If you think of a barbecue, that's what we're trying to achieve, a barbecue sort of effect. And so it's going to be quite hot, but there's no flames, so it's just like a dry heat almost. And our parcels basically go in there, and these shouldn't take very long at all. I'm anticipating inside 10 minutes to cook these. So another benefit of this is it's fast food. There we go. So you can see there the leaves are starting to wilt, and we'll just keep an eye on them basically. Like I say, if we mess it up, we'll just have a bit of a charred outside to our halloumi and nice gooey insides.
Which would be lovely.
Lovely stuff. I'm going to twizzle Max's kebab as well. Make sure he's getting a nice rounded heat all around. Oh, yes. So a little bit active cooking, but not too much. My kebab's been on there that a little bit longer, so it's nearly done now. Oh, me halloumi's bubbling away there. Whoa. Well, how would you describe the smell, Max? Can you smell any of that yet? Wafting up?
I can.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Oh.
Gorgeous.
Right. Let's stop filming and we'll get yours on, and we'll catch up with people in a bit. Watch these later. But things are progressing swiftly. So chopsticks at the ready. I've got my billy can. These billy cans come with an insert, which is excellent. It's just like a nice little tray. basically starting to char like that, look. And some of them, I think this little one here is getting the most of the heat. I could do with some slightly longer chopsticks actually.
It's kicking out some heat.
It's roasty. But yeah, look at that.
Oh.
So I'm just trying to manage it a little bit, and they're not far off. I think it was this one I'd seen actually. You can sort of see the halloumi starting to get toasty there, and the leaves are starting to burn through. Max's are going nice golden under there. You can see that, Max.
Oh
down
yeah.
there, yours. Yep.
Yeah. There we go.
So we're not far off really. So what we will do, oh, it's toasty that. Let me, let's just have some glory shots of the fire while I go.
Yeah, we revised the chopsticks. Show you where we are today as well. Battery's about to go.
You losing your battery?
I reckon so. Reckon you've got.
Got my phone.
Go, go, go.
All right, so let's see if we can show you what these look like inside. It's like I'm missing one. You've eaten one. Thief. Up my chopstick game, I think. There we go. So let's just for the guys at home.
Oof.
Look at that. So obviously we could clear off most of that charred stuff, but actually I quite like it. It tastes good.
Oh, and if we have some flowers from the ramsons, you could sprinkle it on top. Drop it because it's just burnt your finger.
I do my best. Who should we go for? Jamie Oliver?
Can you do Jamie Oliver? What about Hugh Finlay Whitensall?
Don't know Hugh that well.
Guy from Liv. You don't know Hugh that.
Oh yes, very nice. You can really taste the ramsons. It comes through absolutely marvellous flavour. It's wild and fresh, grown it in the garden, and it's come through bloody marvellous. That is absolutely beautiful.
I'm not sure what you're doing.
I don't know.
You're just doing you.
Generic,
Just you.
generic chef. Oh, it's Packer food. Oh, yeah, Packer. Oh, big flavours, beautiful. Oh, it's so flavourful. It's fresh. It's good for you. You know, get it in the school dinners. Oh, Packer. It's really nice, guys. Yeah, so like I said, really quick, really easy, and I'm being genuine now. Look, right? This is me. It's good. It's good food. It tastes really subtle. It's garlic, but it's subtle. So the ramsons, because they cook so fast, you lose a lot of the flavours. I think people, you know, when they cook with them, like in food at home,
Yeah.
they'll put them in like garlic, and it actually cooks too much. You lose a lot of the flavour. So what I do is I'll put it in right at the very end and just let it almost, you know, just kind of wilt to get the most of the flavour out there. I really need to practice my chopsticks. There we go.
Yeah. Nice.
So on there, and then just to finish it, and then
Oh, it doesn't half smell good.
it smells beautiful.
It
Doesn't it?
does.
There we go, look. So you've got your leaves there. Those leaves are great. Just eat those. Oh, nom nom.
Lovely.
Very nice. Hello again. Oh, finished lunch, and you can hear by the rattling that I've got my billy can and my water filter with me, and we're going to take a little stroll to the stream together once again. So it's at this time of day where we look at looking at the next one of our needs if we're out camping. So we've got a shelter set up with the tarp or the natural shelter. The next thing we might need to consider then is getting some water. So obviously that plays into where you site your camp as well, making sure that you're near a good water source, especially if you're going to have a fire. So if you're going to have a fire, you by necessity need to have enough water nearby to put that fire out if it gets out of hand. So making sure you've got that. We've got the stream, so we're really lucky. so we're heading down there. But yeah, so we've got the shelter up. You know, you potentially left your rucksack with the tarp and just going off to collect some water. But we need to make sure it's safe to drink. And there are really sort of 5 groups of contaminants in water. On the primary course, we tend not to go into too much detail about all of them, because the level of your detail doesn't really matter as long as you know how to process it. And so in general, what we want to produce is clear water that we can sterilise, and we can sterilise it by boiling. So basically, all of the contaminants that you might get in water, you've basically got all the things that can make you poorly, which you don't want to drink. So I'm going to stay up here just because I don't want the sound to get drowned out by the stream. Hi Fiona, can you let me know if the sound's working okay? I'm filming myself at this point without Max. Yeah, so we're at the stream. There are these 5 contaminants. So basically, the first one would be bits of stuff floating in the water. So things like bits of leaves, bits of twig, maybe some silts and some sediment, that sort of thing. It's generally worse if it's been raining as well. So we want to get clear water, and it might be that all those things, they're not poisonous, but what they do is they might irritate your insides. So like a good example is, you could imagine, let's say further up this stream, a bunch of people have been crossing that stream and they've trampled a load of, I don't know, let's say brambles into the stream, and there might be a few bramble thorns floating in your drink. If you don't filter those out, they're not poisonous, but just by the nature of them being sharp and inside, they're going to irritate you. So it's good to do that. Yeah, I do hope you can hear me. Do let me know if you can't, and I'll fix the microphone. But yeah, I hope everything's coming through fine there. Yeah, so basically, where was I? Yeah, so we're going to take out the turbidity, which is what this is for. It's just a fabric filter. It will give us clear water. And then outside of that, we can make everything safe except chemicals. So making sure that you're not below farmland, so you've not got agricultural runoff, pesticides and that sort of thing in the water. Making sure you're not near a road, so you're not getting bits of petrol and diesel and that sort of thing as well, is good. So what I'm going to do is I am going to collect some water now and filter it with the bag. So again, I hope you can hear me. I'm just going to flip the camera around. Somebody's given me a thumbs up there, thank you. If you can't hear me, do let me know and I'll fix the microphone. Alright, so I've got this stream. I know that it's not running through any sort of farmland, any roads or anything like that, so I'm confident there's no chemical pollutants in there. It's also quite clear today, so if I collect some, it's quite clear, but there are some bits in, you can see, look. So we don't want those in our drink, and we want to filter them out. So let's have a look at that one. Yeah, see, not too bad. So in dire straits, we might not need to filter that, we might just want to boil it. But we want a really solid system in place. So on the primary days, like I say, we don't go into too much detail. What you need to know, the essential bits of information is, if you filter water and then treat it to make it sterile, then it's safe to drink. So clear water that you've sterilised is safe to drink. And there are really 2 ways that we can do that, broadly speaking. We could coarsely filter it with one of these canvas bags, which I'm just saturating now, and that will take out all the particulates, all the bits, and then we just have to worry about things like bacteria and viruses and parasites, that sort of thing, which we can then treat by boiling. So all of those things are neutralised if you boil the water. So in terms of what information you want to take away from our primary course, it is that if you filter and boil water, it's safe to drink. And that's all you have to do. It's as simple as that, really. I'll show you another method when we get back up to the base camp, sort of using modern tools, but it's as simple as that. So these millbank bags aren't available anymore, unfortunately. The military stopped making them, but there is a trap making them under the name of Brown filter bags. So if you want a Brown's filter bag, that's what you need to buy these days. They do exactly the same thing, made of the same fabric, they're just brown. But it filters like that, and you basically let it run off for a while and then catch what's running off, and that will give you clear water. And it could be really, really filthy water, so I've kind of stirred up the bottom there in doing that. You can see how dirty it is inside, but what comes out of the bottom is clear. So I'm going to take this back to camp with a billy can's worth as well there, and we'll filter that up at camp, and then we'll look at boiling it to make it safe to drink again. Yep. So I'm back up at the camp, and I just thought I'd mention to you the two broad systems that we employ to make water safe outdoors then. So what we've got here in front of me is a couple of modern water filter options. I'll grab another one for you actually as well. So with the millbank bag, which is over there filtering, we'll have a quick walk over to it in a second. We're basically coarse filtering, so all we're doing with that is producing clear water, so water that's free from turbidity essentially. We then need to make that safe to drink, and because we're camping and we're kind of having a fire and all those sorts of things, we can boil the water, and by bringing the water to a rolling boil, it kills anything in there that will be harmful to us. However, you might want to have a different approach. So it might be that the millbank bag is a little slow, a little passive, it just sits there, and all it's doing is making clear water, it's not making it safe to drink. So it might be that you want to adopt a more modern system. So we've got a few different options. The first one that I ever started using was this one, this MSR Hyperflow pump. So basically the way this one works, it's kind of like the other one, which I'll show you in a second. It has got this pre-filter element, which I've attached a weight to, because one of the downsides of that filter that I found anyway was that this filter would float to the top of anything that I put it in, and I wouldn't be able to suck water up because it'd be floating on top. So I've weighted that with my own little weight so that it sinks. But then from that, it's just this pump action thing. So that opens and closes in this direction, and you pump water up and pump it down, and that will take out pretty much all the bacteria and the parasites and those sorts of things, but it won't take out some of the cysts, and it won't take out viruses. So if I was concerned that they were in the water, which I might be, and we never know, so again on the primary course we're talking about fundamental basics, so trying to get rid of any sort of issues with lack of experience, giving you information that you can just take away and use, and it's going to work no matter what. What we do is we assume that it's the worst case scenario every time, and we want to take away everything. So that filter might need a secondary process. So what we would do is pair that modern filter with something that will take out viruses, principally something like chlorine or chlorine dioxide tablets, which you can get at outdoor shops. You can get them on Amazon, places like that. I quite like the Oasis brand of tablets. I believe they're sort of military grade disinfectants, but they're really, really good, quite cheap, and they don't taste too bad. So pairing a modern pump filter with something that takes out viruses and some of the smaller pathogens is a really solid option, and that way you don't need to have a fire, you can filter water on the go, and kind of belt and braces that you produce safe water. So that would be, some modern filters, and then a chemical treatment would be one way to look at it. So you've then got modern filter and chemical treatment, or you've got a coarse filter and boiling would be the sort of two broad pairs that we look at. But we could also, there's obviously space for nuance in there, but we're trying to ignore nuance at this point. So we've got some sort of pump, modern filter, and then chemicals. One thing to mention though is some filters like this Liberty bottle that I've been using essentially filter out viruses as well. So with a filter like that, they're more expensive, but the Liberty bottles, you don't need any secondary treatment. You can just take water from a stream, pump it and drink it, and it's safe to drink. The downside with that is because the element is so fine, it requires quite a long time to filter, so it's not as fast of a flow rate as the Hyperflow, and you need to keep on top of sort of keeping it clean by keeping it washed, and they'll clog really quickly if there's a lot of sediment in the water, or if there's like an algae bloom or something. So even then, even if I've got these modern filters with me, I'll still take the millbank bag over there, because if the water's really cloudy, I can coarse filter it with that and then run it through a modern filter and I've got drinking water. But again, we're starting to get a bit more complex for the scope of the primary course. A lot of those sort of options we explore during the itinerant course that we run. So what we've got on the primary then is a modern filter and chemicals, or filter bag and boiling. And it's the filter bag and boiling that gives you the most options to explore skills, because we need to boil that water. So we'll move away from the modern filters and we'll go and look at the millbank. One thing I'll show you on the way though is in here I keep Sawyer Mini, which is my kind of modern option for backpacking with. So I've got that in there, and that filters everything to the same spec as the Hyperflow. So pretty good, and it's small and lightweight, so that's another option. But here we go, so that's that millbank bag, and I'll risk disturbing it a little bit. So you can see in there it's quite cloudy. It's not horrendous though, but that's perfectly nice clear drinking water coming out of it. So it's clear, but there are microscopic things in there that we want to get rid of, and we're going to boil them. So the next session is another knife session. We're going to make a pot hanger, and then following on from that we're going to look at fire lighting skills to make a fire. So we'll bounce back to you really quickly after Max is looks like he's finished his fire prep. Yep, nice one mate. So yeah, we'll do a quick knife session, show you how to make a simple pot hanger, and then we will light some fires. So developing on some of the skills that we looked at earlier, we employ the knives again to make a pot hanger, and we also introduce the folding saw on this course as well, just to make one of the notches on here. So what we issue everybody with is a green stick that we'll coppice from somewhere in the woods, and we'll basically get you to make the simplest pot hanger for hanging a billy can over the fire. We've obviously got examples of things like tripods and stuff around camp, which people can look at for sort of inspiration. But in terms of actually just being on an overnight course, or an overnight trip, like if you're camping for yourselves, one of the basic things you need to do is just boil the water. You know, whether you're boiling pasta or making a hot drink, you've seen us kind of cook next to the fire, so you can obviously do that without any sort of pot hanger or anything. But just very simply being able to put a pot over the fire is quite important. But because you're just out for one night, you don't want to spend sort of half your day making an elaborate kind of rig and all that sort of thing. You just want something that you can put together quickly and boil some water. So straight stick is all you need, and as the aeroplane flies over the top, I don't know if the audio is picking that up or not. So we've got our knife again. I've again made sure I'm in a clear space. I'm not going to take any step or anything like that. And what we want to do is just get these side shoots off for a start. So a good tip when you're cleaning up a stick is you want to cut in the direction of growth. So to take off a side shoot, I'm going to cut it off that way. If you try and cut down like that, the knife kind of digs in and it's just a bit more difficult. So cut in the direction of growth, up and off, just like that. We then want to stab this in the ground at about 45 degrees so that we can hang our billy can off of it. So on one end we're going to put a point. So again, that same strong forehand grip from earlier in the day, cutting close to the hand and slicing across the wood, and we just take off little bits in one angle until we get halfway through the stick, like that. And you can see the middle there, that pith. We then turn the stick around by a third and slice down again. So nice little cuts, nice and efficient. And then on the back side we've got a knot, so that'll take a bit more work to get through. So again, if I say come out to the side of my body and push, a bit more strength in there, and there we go. So that's a nice, just strong, simple point on the stick. The length of the stick then for this sort of thing, always put the knife back in the sheath, wants to be about 1.5 meters, something like that, maybe a bit longer. So for me, just from practice, the sort of best measure I've got of this is from my fingertips, comes all the way along my body to my opposite shoulder, and I cut it off there. So that's going to be where I make my cut. So if I just mark that with the stick. Yeah. Now if I didn't have a saw, I could cut through this stick by just doing that forehand cut around and around and around and around many times, taking little bits off all the way around, and eventually you get to a point where you can snap the stick off. But something that really helps is to have a saw, which is what I've got just here. So on the course you get the opportunity to use one of these as a Laplander saw. Ubiquitous within the bushcraft community. There's a bit of a running sort of joke between these and silky saws. Don't take it too seriously, it's personal preference, whichever one works for you, go for it. I like the Laplanders. They've got a button to release, so you press the button, the blade opens and it locks in place, and you have to press the button to close it. But with any lock it can break, so I don't trust that. I have seen a few people, once they've got the teeth all gummed up with sawdust, sort of tap the saw to clean it off, and they've basically caused the lock to fail and swung the blade around towards the fingers. So it's a possibility, you know. So I basically, although it's good to have that bit of security, I don't trust it. Ultimately, I trust my technique better than I trust the device. So what we're going to need though is a brace. So if we come to this fallen log here, basically we want to cut through this stick. So what we would do with the clients is show them that these saws operate on the pull stroke, so they cut on the pull back. So it's a gentle push forward and a strong pull back to saw through there. And now I've already got my mark, and I can get a strong grip down here, so this hand is safe from the teeth. I'm not sort of here where I could potentially cut myself. So hold it down there and just start to saw. Now it might be, if you want to do something really precise, that you want to put that that cut exactly where you want it. So for example, the notch we're about to do wants to be sort of just a couple of fingers down from the top, but it wants to be quite neat and quite precise. So what we can use there is a little tool called the idiot stick. Why do we call it the idiot stick?
You'd be an idiot not to use it.
Max has done one or two of these courses by now. So yeah, let's say 2 finger widths down. I want to be really precise. So what we do is we use this stick to brace the saw, so that I can get a really neat controlled cut like that, right? It's nice and neat. And I think actually I'll come down a little bit further just so we've got some space to work with here. So let's go for 3 fingers down. And we'll saw in there. I'm going to saw in about halfway, but certainly not past halfway if I can help it. So about that far. And then we can put the saw away for this part now. So what we need to do now is cut that into a notch for the pot hanger to rest on. So this is going to be the stop that stops this pot from sliding down. So we want to put a notch in the top of that. Now this bit can be quite tricky, because now we've run out of a lot of space here. So in terms of holding the stick safe with my bracing hand, I don't have that much space really. So what I like to do is keep it stabbed in the ground down there, and use this thumb and finger right at the very top of the stick just to stop it sort of wiggling around very much, so that I can operate like this. Yeah. You can imagine if I was trying to hold this free and trying to carve like that, there's a lot. I'm getting very close to my hand, I'm getting quite bunched up. So I like to lock it into the ground with a point. Like I said, just brace it back here with the thumb. And then we just do these little cuts down there. Again, the sign of a good craftsperson is someone who can make very fine shavings. So don't be worried if this takes you a while. So if you're making things that you can see through, then you're on the right track by my book. Yeah, so just a little bit of wiggling. I'm being very careful, so I don't want to split the bottom half of the stick. Like that. There we are. So that's a nice strong notch. Yeah, really nice and neat. So good craftsmanship there, nice and tidy. That's a good sign of somebody that's well practiced if everything's neat and tidy. The last thing we want to do then is we just want to make the top of the stick a bit more durable, because we're going to want to hammer it in the ground a little bit. So just as we've done all the way through that forehand cut, we're just going to come back from the edge about 4 or 5 millimeters, just push the edge off like that and go round like that. This is called beveling or chamfering the edge. It basically makes it very durable for hitting on when we come to hammer that in. Yep. So that is our pot hanger done. And just to demonstrate that for you, so we can move on. Let's say Max is going to have his fire here. Yeah, when he comes to the fire demonstration in a bit, or whichever one of us ends up doing it. I've got my billy can there as well. So coming back about 45 degrees, like I say. Just need a wacky stick. It's the technical term for that tool.
Wacky stick.
Wacky stick. I'll just grab one off the shelf. Nice one. So good strong grip. Like that. So you can see the reason why I made that so long is because I want a good steep angle, but I also want to hammer it in far enough to take the billy can when it's weighted. So if I simulate a bit of weight in that can, yeah, it's going to hang and not sag too close to the bottom. So we've got good clearance for a fire under there. And of course, if it's too long, that's great because you can always cut it a bit shorter. The frustration is you make it too short and then your pot's too close to the fire. So being able to hang it something like that is going to be good. And I do that first so that I know, okay, if I put my fire here somewhere, I'm going to get most of the flames under there, so you know, make a bit of marks. And then we're good to go to make the fire. So that's just set up. Let's have a walk over to the millbag bag, see if that's ready. Yeah, look at that. So you've had that going in real time, and it's just about filtered 2 litres of water there. But the benefit of this passive system is that, so this is the order that I set up chems. We got the shelter up, like I said. We then go and get water and get the filter on while we do the other things. So it's quite efficient with energy. I'm not having to actively pump water and then get on with a different job. I can set this up and let it go while we crack on. Alright, so we'll move on to the fire lighting session. So again, we'll take another quick break. We'll just get some equipment out and I'll talk you through maybe 1 or 2 of the techniques that we teach on the course. A little teaser. Alright, see you in a bit. Hello again. So, welcome to our live stream of the primary bushcraft course. The sessions are drawing to a close now. We're kind of moving up to our closing session, which is boiling the water to make a hot drink at the end of the day, which we do kind of as a communal exercise. So there's 10 people on this course, and so what we do is we have 2 groups of 5, and in those teams we basically produce enough hot water for them all to have a hot drink. But leading up to that, we look at your own personal fire lighting skills. So that might be that you've never done any of this before and you're learning it all very fresh. So in one kind of element, if you're on this course, we'll teach you sort of the fundamentals. But in the other element, if you've played around with some of these things before and you're kind of wanting to improve, then obviously me and Max are here to facilitate that for you. So these sessions, they're a little open-ended in the sense that we try and tailor it to each person that's on the course. But in general, what we look at is means of igniting a fire, and then the tinder that you can use. So tinder is the thing that basically produces a flame. So with matches and lighters, you might still need a tinder bundle, but you've already got a flame. So in theory, you could produce what's called a one-match fire, which is where you strike the match, you have a flame, so you then want to make that flame grow. So the other element that we explore is looking at fail-safe methods. So things like lighters and matches, they can get damp, they can break, they cannot work. So one of the things that we look at is the fire steel. And we use these strike fire steels just because we find them to be really reliable and they make good sparks very easily. So we talk a little bit about the different types, but these kind of are unfailing. The only thing you can do wrong with these is leave them wet for a long time. So this is one that I had left in a vest that we go canoeing in, one of the buoyancy aids, and it had stayed wet for a long time, so you can kind of see that's all corroded. and it will eventually just dissolve away to nothing. But even though it's corroded, we can still get sparks of it, so they're quite reliable. There are all different types, and we kind of talk about those a little bit on the course, but the strike fire ones you can't go wrong with. So with these we definitely do need tinder, because we're getting a spark, we've not got a flame, so we want to use the tinder to drive this spark into a flame. So we'll have some man-made options, which we've got here. So we've got things like cotton wool, rubber. You can actually slice that up fine enough that that would take a spark and go to flame. Or we've got this wax card. So the only thing I carry in my rucksack, which is specifically my kind of emergency fire lighting kit, so if it's really really wet and I'm struggling to light some of the natural materials, I don't carry, you know, I don't carry a tinder pouch with lots of different things in it. I just carry that. So I rely on nature for like 90% of my fires, and if it's one of those days where I just want to fire quick or I'm struggling a little bit, I crack a bit of this stuff out. So people get the opportunity to play with that, the fire card, the tinder card, or you can make your own by dipping makeup cotton pads in melted wax. We talk about that on the course. Or you can play around with things like, in my toiletries kit I'll have a pack of tissues and I'll have some hand sanitizer. So you know, using those two together is a really good way to make a solid flame to start a fire. But all these sorts of things we play with on the course. What I want to show you today is just, let's go out, as soon as it's a nice dry day, we'll go out and we'll collect some natural tinder, and we'll see if we can light it with a fire steel. So if you'd like to join me, we'll go and have a look. Okay, so all different times of year there are different things that are available to us. We happen to be at a time of year where there is a surplus of dry bracken, and dry bracken is really good tinder. What you'll find is it grows on a long stem like this, and the urge is to just grab that and pull it up. But the thing about bracken is it splits down its length into a razor edge. It's really sharp. I've cut my hands quite badly on it before. So when we collect it, we go to the side stems that have actually got the useful stuff on, and we just snap them off sideways. Yeah, so we don't run our hands down bracken, we just snap them off sideways. So I will collect a little bit of that. Bracken's really good because it's like tissue paper. It dries out really really fast in the wind. So all the leaves are kind of small and individual on their own. If you really look down, it's kind of like a fractal. You've got all these little stems here on this one side shoot, and then if you zoom out, that's what this whole thing looks like. So they're quite beautiful. They're really really good tinder. So we'll collect a bit of that and I'll see if I can light it for you with the fire steel. Like I said, because we're focusing on a single overnight camping trip and giving you the skills for that, being able to light stuff like this with a fire steel or even a match, that's quite a legitimate way of making a fire. So that's the sort of focus of today, is to give you the fire steel skills, but actually the focus is building the fire. So there's a whole skill set involved in actually building the fire. If we jump on one of those stumps,
yeah,
there,
go for it.
let's jump on this one. Yeah. Alright. So I've got my tinder bundle. I've not had to work very hard at all today because it's all nice and dry. I've not had to dry it out and stick it in a pocket and all that. What I want to do is just sort of break it up a little bit, make a little pile, and we'll try and light that in a second. So on the course we look at two ways to use the fire steel. We've got this classic sort of big striking method, which throws lots of hot sparks down the fire steel. The other one that we look at is one where we hold the striker still and we pull backwards with the fire steel, and it gives you this sort of incendiary effect just there. So that's those are the techniques we look at. So it might be that you can sort of throw sparks into there like that, but probably better would be to throw them in this way around. And basically this session is all about just playing, so giving people the opportunity who've not used a fire steel before to play with one. Yeah. And if they have, then obviously we can work with them to develop their skills a bit further. Oh, not quite there. So you get the opportunity to play with this on the primary course, but what you also get the chance to do is use the match. So like I say, the big challenge really is once you've played with these, is to get a one match fire. Now if you've got the skill and the sort of prior experience to do this with the fire steel, that's great, you can have a go. But for most of the clients, it will be the opportunity to use a match to make a fire for themselves, and then incorporate what they've learned from that session to make the big fire. But there we go, so those are two techniques. So that technique of holding the striker still and drawing the fire steel back along the top of it, I tend to call that the draw steel technique. You can also use that with a knife, but on the primary courses we don't go there just yet. We let people just get these basic skills just with the fire steel on its own. Grand. So that would be some natural tinder and the fire steel. So what we'll do is we'll get set up for the big fire, and we'll boil some water as well there. Okay, so I've got my water there. Max can show you how clear it is. Pretty good?
Pretty good.
So we're going to light our fire now. So this, essentially, if you're out camping, this would be the point of the day where you're kind of winding down, I suppose. You've got your shelter up, you've got your water collected, you'll have some food that you brought with you, and you're all set for the night. So you're ready to sort of settle down with the fire. What I will say at this point is that you need explicit permission in England and Wales to light a fire from the landowner. So if you do not have permission from the people that own the land, don't light a fire. You can get in a lot of trouble for it. It's also quite disrespectful to those landowners. So getting permission to light a fire is crucially important, really. Once you've got permission, you then need to look at the practicalities of it. So is the ground suitable? You're not in a spruce woodland that's going to set fire to the ground and spread across and set the whole forest on fire, which we have some issues with here all the time. We've got a lovely spruce plantation in this woodland, and it's quite sheltered in there, so people go in there and camp, unfortunately. Don't know any better and set fire to the ground, and I've spent many hours with the fire patrol putting the fires out. So yeah, making sure the ground's suitable is something that we discuss on the courses. Making sure, like I mentioned earlier, that you've got loads of access to water to put the fire out should you need to. Really important. So make sure you've got permission, make sure the ground's suitable, and make sure you've got a plentiful access to water to put the fire out. Outside of that then, do you need to have a fire would be the consideration. It requires quite a lot of natural resources, and you do put the forest at risk from having a fire. So the other thing I'd think about is, do you need a fire? What are you doing with it? Could you do it in another way? Is it more applicable on that day hike, for example, to just use a little camping stove? Are you there for long enough to justify all the time and effort it takes to have the fire and clean it up? But outside of all that, it is a beautiful thing to have a fire, and being able to use natural resources to do that, and have the skills to use those resources to put it out and hide it as if it was never there is also quite a satisfying skill set. So that's what we teach on the course. So now that we're ready to have the fire, then what we need to consider is boiling this water. So I've got my pot hanger set up just from earlier, so we're going to imagine the smoke's going that way from our fire, so we know the wind direction is a little bit sort of towards Max. So I could probably put my fire just my side of this can. And the way we light fires on the courses is to put a raft on the ground. That does many things, but key to what that does is it puts a barrier between the wet ground and our early fire. So it keeps it away from the cold and the wet, which is quite important for a young fire. It lets oxygen in underneath the fire, so lots and lots of oxygen can rush in and sort of jet fuel this fire. And fundamentally, these sticks are good firewood sticks, so these aren't just any old sticks off the forest floor from anywhere. I've thought about these sticks, they're good dry firewood sticks. What that means is they'll start to burn really early on, and as they start to burn, they'll give off smoke. Before they ignite and light for themselves, they'll start off-gassing, throwing the smoke off. That'll pass through the flames of the fire and ignite, and we'll get this kind of jet fire effect. So a really solid raft on the ground. Max has then collected some really good kindling for us. So again, all these things are sort of varied and nuanced, but if for the broad strokes, we've got matchstick thickness twigs, we've got pencil thickness twigs, and we've got thumb thickness twigs. So if you've got a good pile of each of those, that's a good way to start the fire. And obviously you can blur the lines a little bit, that's fine, but being really strict with yourself and actually going, you know what, have I got a good pile of matchstick thick twigs and pencils and thumbs in that regard? If you're strict with yourself, and if you're in any doubt, go off and get some more. So one of the running jokes on the courses is if somebody comes to us and says, have we got enough, we say no. We always say no until they stop asking. And it's just good practice. So we've got our raft, we've then got our thinnest stuff, and what we teach on the courses is basically a setup to light this fire in the worst of conditions. So if it was absolutely pouring it down with rain, this should still work to light a fire. And what that means is that we have a bundle of these matchstick thick twigs that's about as big as somebody's head. So if you imagine holding somebody's head, it should be about that thick. So you could probably get away with a little more of these, but we've had lovely dry weather here today, so, and it's just me and Max in the woods, so we don't need to be using all those resources. And we split that bundle in half, and we cross it over one over the other, and put that under the jerry can, just there. So what I've got is a void here to ignite my fire in, and then I've got all this fine stuff above the flames to ignite first of all. And I've opened that in the way that will hopefully let the air rush in this direction and help to ignite it. Alright, so like I say, what we do on the courses is we've already challenged everybody to light a one match fire for themselves using the matches. So what we'll say to them for this fire, working in their slightly larger groups, is to basically light some of the man-made materials we've got. So whether that's the cotton wool or the wax paper, or if they're really confident they want to use some natural materials, they're very welcome to. But the goal really isn't so much about the ignition side of it. So even if that's matches for some people, you know, if this is brand new to you, lighting a fire with a match will be challenge enough for today. But the purpose of the session is to boil the water. So as long as you can come out for your night camping and get water boiling, you have succeeded in your fire lighting session. It doesn't matter how you went about it. We're going to use the wax paper today. So with that wax paper that I was talking about, again available on our website, haha. But you can also just use cotton wool or make your own. But a few pulls like this. The other benefit of this technique is you can pull shavings off without it igniting, and then a slightly more violent one will ignite the shavings and ignite the wax paper. And then if I leave myself a little nugget, I can just introduce that into there. There we go. Okay, so that goes underneath, just like that. And what we want is for that to lick up into the sticks above it. I take the effort at this point to put my fire steel safely in my pocket.
Ooh, I'm hooked.
You hooked?
Oh,
Microphone's caught on the fire. There we go. So we light that underneath. And you can see now that'll start to come out. Now if it's really damp, this will take quite a while to progress. This is really dry, so I imagine we'll get rich flames coming up very soon. What we'll do is we'll start to add our pencils. So leaving them quite long is good because you can sort of manipulate them as you go into the fire. But basically that V that I set up initially, that cross with the sticks, we maintain that then with the new sticks. So if these are going on in this angle, the next sticks will go on in that angle. And the cross is under the billy can. It gives you the best chance to get the sticks under the fire.
A shot of this.
Yeah. And just on cue, Max, what happens every time I light a fire on these sessions?
The wind changes direction.
The wind flies up. It's unbelievable every time. Every time we light a fire when on one of these courses, without fail, the wind flies up at that exact moment and blows the flames away from the billy can.
At the complete other direction. It's been going all day.
Just wheels it around. I don't know what I've done to the
fire gods.
To the fire gods.
Yeah.
That's all that blasphemy is as a child. But there we go. So just keeping your sticks building up in that V stops it from collapsing, stops it from getting messy, and it gives you a really reliable and predictable behaviour to the fire as well. Yeah, so it's just going to keep building up and building up. It's also winter at this point in time, and our base camp is particularly bare of all greenery, and it's sort of exposed to the wind more than it normally is. typically we've got a bit more of the vegetation to keep the wind out at this low level. And that might be another thing to consider as well. If you're camping and you've got your shelter set up, as a windbreak for yourself. It'll also act as a windbreak for your fire. And you know what? We should have lit this fire right through that shelter. That would have been a great shot.
Yeah.
We're so used to delivering the sessions here where we actually teach that we're missing out on good camera opportunities. Oh well.
Next time.
Next time. Yeah, should we do another one of these live streams? What do you think?
Yeah, let us know.
Let us know in the comments below.
Hopefully we'll get better at filming and
Yeah.
not have a mic on a stick.
Mic on a stick. Sticky mic. So, again, we're keeping that open V structure to let the flames build up. And we just let it progress through all of our kindling that we've got here to hand, so I'm not running about now panicking looking for sticks. It's all here ready for me, all prepared. Ready to go. Yeah.
This is also the point, if you've not put your shelter the right way, you'll know about it straight away, won't you?
Yeah, smoke in the shelter.
You know, a pretty rough night.
There we go. Alright, so while that's coming up to the boil then, let's look in my rucksack, shall we? I'll come over to you, mate.
Yeah, go for it. You put ground or bag? Bag, table.
Let's keep the fire in shot, shall we?
Yeah.
Maybe if you jump on the log and I'll unload onto this thing here.
Yeah, sure.
That works. Alright. I'll just grab a couple more bits of that actually.
He's coming.
So just keeping an eye on the fire. I've got a habit of going on to talk about this and then not paying attention to the water boiling. But,
I'll keep an eye.
that's not looking too bad. I'm just wondering whether, just for the sake... Nah, we'll be okay. We'll carry on. Alright, so we talked earlier about shelters then. And, like I say, sort of camping out. So if I was electing to camp out, I'd obviously have a sleeping bag. I'd also have a bivvy bag. So a bivvy bag is basically a waterproof outer shell, like a waterproof jacket that you would wear, but it's for your sleeping bag. This one is a really packable one by Snugpack, which I really like. I know it is quite small, so if you're particularly tall or large,
I was going to say rounder, but yeah.
round of girth,
Yeah.
it might be a little snug, but I really like that one. But the British Army surplus ones, like Max has got, really solid. Have you got that with you today?
I have. It's at the far bottom of my pack, but
No
they're just a little bit bulkier, aren't they?
A little bit bulkier to carry, but they
A
are
little
more
bit heavier.
roomy as well, but more durable.
And the outer's a bit more, like if sparks are dropping on your bivvy,
Yeah,
it's
it's
a
a
little
bit
bit.
more resilient.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, but the point is that bivvy bags, when you're sleeping under a tarp or in a natural shelter, are critical really to keep your sleeping bag dry and keep it warm. In an emergency though, it might be that you carry some foil blanket with you. Foil blankets, fine, it's good. It blocks out the wind and it reflects some of your radiant heat loss back to you. But if you think about those factors of heat loss that we talked about earlier, radiant heat loss is tiny, really minimal. So although they work very well, they're kind of working best on the sort of minimal side of the heat loss. So a better option would be the yellow bag, which I'll show you in a second. But you can also get slightly more robust big ones. So this is just a blanket. This one's like a sack that you can climb inside of. But again, they're quite flimsy. So I tend to pair these with other things. But they do work very well, and you can make basically if you've built a natural shelter that's not very good, you can use this to help waterproof it inside, and the reflectiveness will bounce some of your firelight back to you and that sort of thing. So they do have a value, they're just not the best thing that you can carry. But that's just to go with shelters. So just what I wanted to show you whilst our water comes up to the boil, I'm just going to put a few more sticks on there.
Yeah. Angela. Remember Angela from our itinerary?
Angela, yeah, I've been chatting to Angela. Hi, Angela.
She commented saying the wind changed direction from Richard.
Yeah.
Angela were making the fire.
Always
switch.
does. Like I say, you know, if you'd use your tarp and your shelter to benefit that, but that's sort of just one of the inherent restrictions of operating in a camp like this, a base camp. Alright, so what I'm basically going to do is just give you a very, very quick rundown of what I carry in a day sack. So this is not an overnight sack. This is what I carry if I'm just off for a hike all day long and I'm not planning to camp out, but there are some things in here that might be of use if I needed to camp out. So don't worry about the names or the brands of any of these, it's just about the function. That goes for the rucksack as well, so it's just about the function. So first of all, business cards, critical bit of kit. I've got in the front there. This is in no particular order, I'm just going to unpack my bag for you. In the bottom I have my tarp. So this is my day hike tarp, one that I might not, it makes more sense if I'm camping for a weekend or a week to have a 3x3 tarp like we demonstrated earlier, so you get more living space. But if I just need to string something up to have lunch under, or again, you know, if I need to make an impromptu shelter, this is the super light version of the little, the rectangular tarp. So really, really small actually. Don't notice I've got it. It's good for just carrying about, even if I don't carry it. We've then got, in the first bit, so I'm going to do a little trick with that billy can. If it is windy like this, you need to have flexibility in your approach, is one way to phrase it.
Is that not cheating?
As long as the as long as the water boils, that's the point of the exercise. That is a good point there. We made that pot hanger. You can just put stuff next to the fire. It's just a bit more efficient to have it above the fire. It gives you greater access to the fire in general, and it does boil faster if you've not set it up in the middle of your base camp instead of, you know, in pair with the shelter and that sort of thing.
It's getting that thermal column to begin with, innit? That initial flame to boil the water.
Exactly. Alright, so my kit. I've got a small first aid kit. That's basically what I call a cuts kit. So that's specifically geared to deal with cuts to my fingers if I slip with my knife. That lives with my knife. So the reason it's in my pack today is because at home, in my drawer where I keep my knife, I keep that, I pick them up together, they always travel together. So cuts kit with your knife. I then have a compass. Always have a compass. They're kind of practical navigation tool, one that we use a lot on the Peregrine course. It's got a magnifier on it as well, which I have been able to light fires with actually. Always having a compass. Then specific to me, so not all of this is applicable, I've got an emergency field dressing and a tourniquet. So those are basically for working with the knives, so I'm conscious that I'm working with other people as well. These will deal with big wounds, but you need to have specific training to know how to use these. If you've not been on a first aid course where they've taught you how to use a tourniquet, don't carry a tourniquet. Or better advice would be, go on the first aid course. They're great. I love a first aid course. I can't go on enough of them. I've then got head torch. Always carry a head torch with me all times of year when I'm on a day hike. It might be that I'm accidentally overnighted. It might be that I'm just a bit delayed and actually I could walk back to the car provided I can see where I'm going. So having a head torch is really critical. It also means if you are camping out overnight, whether that's accidentally or you've gone for a weekend camping, being able to see at night is always a good thing, so carrying a head torch. Diving deeper in, walkie-talkie is not really applicable. Me and Max use those to communicate when we're delivering courses. I've then got my belt pouch, so that's essentially all the bits and bobs that I might have in my pockets at different times of the day, but I keep everything in this at home, and then I chuck it in the bag when I'm going for a day hike, so I know I've got everything. But I might distribute it out to pockets if I'm camping, things like a pocket knife. So we talked earlier about what makes a knife legal carry. So that knife is smaller than 3 inches and it folds, but there's no lock. so that's legal carry for in the UK. But there's all sorts of bits and bobs in there. I've got a mosquito head net, I've got some string, I've got spare batteries for my torch, I've got a lighter, I've got my personal fire steel, I've got a magnesium block. I've just been playing with those recently. They're really good fun to just drop a load of shavings in one place and then ignite it with the fire steel. You get this really good sort of incendiary. So like earlier when I was lighting the bracken, it gives you that real core heat initially. I've also got insect repellent, I've got a tool for removing ticks. That's really important these days. Ticks are really prevalent at this point, so being able to just carry a little thing to get rid of tools. I've then got a notepad and a pen just for writing, and I've got, what else have I got in there that's applicable? A couple of extra plasters, headache tablets, sharpening stone, and some of that wax card that I was talking about. So that all lives in there, and it just means I've not got it in 1,000 pockets as I'm hiking in the day, and I just get it out when I need it. A shout out to Brian at Journeyman Handcrafts for the belt pouch. He makes some excellent handmade gear.
Look at it.
Go and support Brian.
Just look at it.
Journeyman Handcrafts. He's a legend, is Brian. Proper top dude. Alright, I've then got the water filter that I'm carrying at the minute. So like I say, I love that Liberty water bottle. I use that quite a lot. But what I'm using at the minute is a Sawyer Mini. So that filter will take out pretty much everything you need to worry about, except for viruses. For the most part, specifically, they do. It's all the technicalities of water filters. I won't get into now, but I'm confident in drinking straight from streams with this system, and it's really small, so it packs up tiny, which I really like. And I keep that in a dry bag just so it doesn't get all my kit wet. I'll put it back in the bag. Alright, so we've got so I can make drinkable water. What that means is that I don't have to carry as much water with me whilst I'm hiking, especially in the UK where we've got water everywhere. Having a filter just means I can top my water bottle up. I've then got my knife that I keep. I may or may not have a knife like that if I'm just hiking for the day. Most often actually I won't have a knife like that. I'll just use my pocket knife because I don't intend to use it for anything, and that pocket knife's easily enough to make the things that we've made today on this course, which is all I might need for an overnight or two. So I only really carry my full knife if I'm actually camping for more than a night, and I want a proper tool with me. Yeah, so that's my belt knife. What else have we got in there? Toilet kit, just some tissues, hand sanitizer, and a lighter. It also makes an excellent emergency fire lighting kit, but mostly just for dealing with my toiletry needs. I've then got another bandana. So bandanas are really useful. You can use them in lieu of the millbank bag as a water filter. You can also use it for taking billy cans off the fire. For example, let's see how our water's boiling. Nearly there.
Yeah.
Want a quick look? Got little bubbles, not got big bubbles yet, so we're just waiting for the big bubbles to come. So yeah, bandanas are really handy. You can also use them for first aid as well, so making slings. There's an article on my blog about all this stuff as well, what to carry in a day pack. So if you want a list to print out and use, you can just take it from that article on the blog at howlbushcraft.com. But it also shows you how to use a roll mat to make a splint for a leg, so you can use that as well. Next layer down. What else have we got here then? I've got some emergency food. So there's not much in there. There's a couple of packets of Oats are Simple, there's a couple of energy drinks and a cereal bar. I'd have to check the use by dates to find out how long that had been in my rucksack for, but it's just there in case I need some food. Like today I dived into it for a coffee because we've not brought the kit coffee that we normally bring on our courses. So a bit of food's always good. And again, if you're accidentally overnighted, so like I say, it's not outside the realms of possibility that you could be hiking somewhere in Scotland or the Lake District, something like that, and you just go down the wrong valley or end up on the wrong side of a hill, and you're either overnighted or you sat there for a long time waiting for a lift or something like that, being able to, you know, make a bit of hot water and have something to eat and make that experience so much better. So I always carry a bit of that. I then got my waterproof jacket. So this is a really durable Ventile jacket that I wear in the forest for the most part, specifically if I'm doing stuff like this, where we're kind of brushing up against trees and branches like fires. It's cotton, but it's waterproof by virtue of its fibres basically swelling up and not letting water through. So Ventile, really, really solid. And this one by Keeler, I especially like because it's got that perfect sort of marriage of old and new. So the old technology of the Ventile, and then it's got this modern membrane inside, which is basically, I think it's a proprietary one to Keeler, but it sort of acts as a secondary water system in there. Very, very good. I've then got my Anchor battery charger, which I've been using today for my phone so that we can do these live streams. I probably don't take that most day hikes I go on, but certainly on overnight trips I'll take a battery pack. And it's also compatible with my head torch, so I can charge my head torch with the battery pack. So it's just a nice little system there. I've then got a first aid kit, so that's my full first aid kit. It's quite a big one because I bring this kit with me when I'm working with groups and things. So a horse over there. So that's quite a big first aid kit. For a personal kit, you could probably get away with a lot smaller, but I just have that one, so I don't differentiate this. I just carry the same one. I've then got some warm layers, so you can imagine sleeping in that shelter that's behind Max. If you wheel the camera around, imagine trying to sleep in that without a sleeping bag. Things like having a warm hat, so a nice warm woolly hat, some warm gloves, and a buff, a merino wool buff, and a bandana would live in there if I wasn't wearing it. It just means that I can get, some good warm clothes on, even if you just stop for lunch, even on, like spring and autumn days in the UK, some summer days as well. It can be cool enough that you just need a bit of warmth. So I carry some warm layers, and then in here I've got my drinking setup. So a metal mug that fits my bottle inside it. I love that, really good system. I always carry that metal mug because it's super light, doesn't weigh anything, but if I've not got my billy can and I need to boil water, I can boil water in that. So I've always got that. And then having a metal water bottle like that, these Clean Canteen ones are really good. They've got good environmental credentials as well, which is why we stock them on the shop. But I can boil water in there. But I might not always take the metal bottle. I might use the Liberty bottle as my water bottle for the day, or I might use a plastic Nalgene bottle, or I might use my flask as well. So I've got a Clean Canteen flask, which is really solid. If I want hot drinks, especially in the winter, I'll carry a hot drink instead of a bottle of water. But I can always boil water, so that's the principle. I've got that to boil water, and then the other water bottles are variable. Little Alpkit titanium spoon lives in there as well, and that's a really nice, neat little system for me. So I like that size bottle because it fits in the mug nicely, and it all holds together really neat. And then I've got the lid to that mug in the bottom of here as well. Just a little, it's basically a metal lid for the mug in there, just for if I am boiling on the fire. Let's check on the water, Max.
Yeah.
Water check. That's looking good. Hey!
Rolling boil.
So that is what we call a rolling boil, or a roiling boil.
Roiling.
Angela will know all about that if you're still watching, Angela.
Yeah, I think she is.
Yeah. So the etymology of that term, it's not rolling like rolling hills, it's roiling, which I think we found out came from the French, but it basically means to circulate, to stir up turbidity. Yeah. So it comes from making stews and soups where you roil all the ingredients together, churn it up. Just a bit of nerd geekery there. It doesn't matter. Call it what you want. It's big bubbles, no troubles. That's what you're after. So a big, vivacious, energetic rolling boil will kill all the pathogens in there, and this water is now safe to drink. So we'll pop that on there. So again, having that sort of versatility with the fire. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating for me being on a live stream and the wind just blowing in the wrong direction for this 20 minutes while we wanted to boil that water. But hey, that's the outdoors. That's being in nature. It is variable, so being flexible in your approach is a legitimate and an appropriate mindset to have. So rather than getting frustrated, just laugh it off like we have and think of another solution. So popping it down next to it, after all, no big deal, and we can use the pot hanger to keep it warm there above the fire. What I'll say at this point as well though is, now that we're done with this fire, my water's boiled and it was just for this demonstration, I'm going to burn off all the ends. Taking all these part burnt ends, putting them into the fire, makes cleaning up after this fire really easy. So we'll put all those ends into there just like that, and we'll let that burn down. Right, let's finish off the day pack section. So we talked about that. So the two things that I carry in here that are left are an orange survival blanket and a roll mat. So the roll mat's great because quite often I'll sit on that at lunchtime if we're sat for a long time. It stops me getting cold, so you've got a lot of blood running through these big muscles on your backside. So having insulation there when you sit is really good. It also is cut down to be this size so that it's big enough to keep my torso warm. So if I do have to lay down and camp on it, it'll keep me warm. But importantly, I like to be in a position to look after other people outdoors as well. And it might be that I'm walking in the Peak District and I come across a hiker that's turned an ankle. Oh, hey, it might even be myself. But with this, you can make a splint to help somebody's leg, or if they've had a bigger accident and they need to lay still while you wait for mountain rescue, you can lay this on the ground and you can put the emergency blanket around them, keep them really warm, and look after them while help comes. So fundamentally, I think those are two things that everybody hiking in the outdoors should carry with them. It's just my soapbox moment. But they're really good. I tend to keep this, so these come as a bag. I tend to keep these as a bag because I want to be able to get inside it, and I think for the most part I can then use that as a bivvy bag. I can stuff it full of leaves and make it as a mattress to sleep on, or if I'm out on the hills and I just want to crawl inside it, I can, and it's fully protected then. It's all the way around me, it's fully protected. Some people like to cut these along the long edge and the bottom to make it more of a blanket, which makes it much easier to help a casualty. If you have found them in the outdoors, you can wrap it around them. But it kind of then stops you being able to use it for those other things. So my personal preference is to leave it as a bag, and then if I need to, I can always just pop the pocket knife out and slice it and get to work. But I tend to keep it as a bag just for the utility, really. But that's everything I think that I've got in my day pack. I would have a warm layer, but I'm wearing it today, so I'd have a warm layer. But it's chilly, so I've got it on. But that article's on our blogs. If you go to howlbushcraft.com and go to the blog, there's an article on what to carry in a day pack. There's also a new one actually on what I carry in addition to this stuff for winter camping. So it shows you, just a couple of little of the bits that we'd use for the sort of colder times of year. Slightly bigger rucksack, slightly warmer layers, that sort of thing. Excellent. All right. So at this time of day, we're kind of winding up the session really. Our clients would have a hot drink, and they'd be having their sort of debrief. We'd show them what we recommend to carry. We talked about additions for camping overnight, so carrying a billy can, sleeping bag, bivvy bag. It's just about all you need in addition to that really. Some food. I suppose that's something I've not shown you, is I'd have some lunch in here as well, obviously, for a day hike. The only thing I've not really talked about is sharpening your tools. So and the tool that we use on our primary courses is this whetstone. So it's a natural stone and it's called an Arkansas stone, and that's basically the stone we'd use to get a nice fine edge on the knife. So it's good enough to get it really sharp really quickly outdoors. So all you'd need basically is I'll jump on the
yeah.
somewhere to seat it, and then with the knife, this is, and again the benefit of that flat bevel is that we can lay the knife flat, roll it till it sits on the edge, and then slice forwards and slice backwards on that sharp edge. And by doing that, you might need to do this maybe once a day if you're using your knife a lot, maybe not that often, but but it's just a good stone to keep the edge on. I use a couple of different stones. I use a DC4, which is a more expensive stone. It's a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit more packable, but it doesn't come with this case, so you can't just pop it down and use it. You have to make something to use it with. There's a video on our YouTube channel of me using that stone actually. But I really like these actually. I only discovered these last year, and I think for 90% of what anybody's going to be using a stone for in the field, these are perfect. The DC4s have just got, they're a little bit thinner and they've got a slightly coarser side, so if you've damaged your knife you can get to work a bit faster. But I think particularly relevant to this course, the primary course, and for people who are, you know, just camping sort of at the weekend, you know, sort of overnighters, maybe two-nighters, you just need to keep the knife fine. Absolutely solid those, and they're really cheap as well. So I like those. So having a means to sharpen your knife is important, whether that's one of these, whether it's a DC4, whether it's a pebble from a stream. If you can sharpen your knife, then your knife will do right by you. We've lit a fire. We need to leave no trace. It's just as important as anything else we've done today, is leaving a place as you find it. And actually, if you've got that skill to legitimately leave a place if you were never there, there's no higher skill in my opinion in bushcraft than being able to pass without leaving a trace. So we've got our fire. We did, after all, put most of the ends in there. Yeah, there's a few little burnt twigs here, which what we'll do, we've still got our base campfire, so they'll go in there. What I would do with any twigs that are partially burnt is bury them into the ground. So make sure they're cold and out and not lit anymore, and bury them into the ground. Just press them in once they're wet. But we want to put this fire out, so we need lots of water. And the way I do this is with my water, go around the outside and make sure I know where the boundary is. So I've got a boundary that's not steaming or wet. Yeah, so I know where the boundary of my fire is. I then douse everything inside that. I might need to get Max out of the smoke. So you can see, even from just that little 20-minute fire that we had, there's a lot of heat built up in there. Completely douse it with water. That's 1 billy can's worth. And you start to break these things up. Now actually, you know, the longer you have the fire, the better you'll end up with less of these bits. These quick fires are the ones that take a little bit of effort to clean up. Keeping everything nice and tidy, keeping everything in the middle. Yeah, we start to get everything nice and cool, cold and wet. So that was 2 litres of water in that billy can. It's not enough. So I'm going to open up our jerry can. Get some more water on there. The only way to know your fire is actually out is to use your hand. So carefully assess and then get in. Yeah, start to break it all down. Make sure it's completely cold, completely out. So a good example, a partly burnt stick. Yeah, it's completely cold and out now, it's totally cool. I can just stab into the ground. Yeah, it was good fertiliser for the trees, and it's not unsightly sticking about the place. So any charred ends like this that just won't break up, I'll walk a bit further around, but typically, like I say, we just stab them right down into the ground, nothing protruding over, and hide it. But they have to be cold and out. Cold and out is the thing. Is it cold? Now it's steaming because it's quite a cold day actually out in the woods today, but I can assure you that is really quite cool now. There's a little bit of warmth in it, but certainly nothing anything close to a fire. Okay, now once we've got these cold, that are all smashed up, we then, as widely as possible, scatter them. By doing this, we're returning good fertiliser to the woods, a bit of charcoal for the trees to eat, as widely as you can. And actually, if I'm in a place that's not my base camp, I'll chuck them in the billy can and go for a little tootle, scatter them as widely as possible. But by doing it barehanded, by taking this time to feel everything, I know it is all positively out. Yeah, if I was at all concerned that it was still too hot, more water would go on. But I'm making sure there is nothing there that can come back to life. Far and wide into the woods. Go. Then with a stick, break the ground up. Like I say, for a 20-minute fire the effect's pretty minimal, but if you've had a fire for longer than an hour or so, it'll start to bake the ground, and then it becomes very difficult for any new plant life to grow back up through it. So we break the ground up just to let the plants have a chance to take back over, and then with our pot stick, we'll save that for another day, so I'm making the most use out of it. And then, because we demonstrate here quite a lot, it's actually quite difficult for us to completely hide it, because we use it time and time again. But the principle would be to get a stick, there we go, and all the material that we raked away earlier to expose the bare ground, we rake back over. It's worth taking a bit of time over this. And coming out wide, gathering some stuff. You can see just where it's generally muddy here as well. As Max pans out a little bit for us now, we should start to see less and less of a sign that we were there. And what there isn't is a big pile of coals in that spot. So there's not a dump of coals there that once the wind blows and the leaves leave is left behind. So as it recovers, it will just renaturalise.
Big difference.
Big difference, yeah. So if you're having a fire, there's no need for a ring of stones, they don't do anything, except as a bit of a windbreak if it's windy. What they do is they give you a level of security in thinking that your fire is contained, and it will just spread underneath. So making sure you're on ground that's suitable for fire would be the way to keep it safe. And then leave no trace. So cool all your embers down, scatter them widely, break up the ground, and scrape it back over to recover it. And then you're left with the one hand of pride.
If you were sensible.
If you yeah, you use both hands. That's anybody that's been on a course, you can tell if they've been on 2 courses. If people have been on 2 courses will only have one mucky hand. If you've got one messy hand, you've then got a clean hand to clean yourself off with without getting all your equipment wet. And actually I'm being a bit daft there because this jerry can's got a pump on it. There we go. So my hands are clean. I feel great about myself because nobody knows I've been here. The forest doesn't mind me being here, and nobody else will either. So if you have a fire, if you have had a fire, put it out. Well, what can I say, folks? Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you got something out of watching our videos. If you like this live stream and you want to do this again, can I speak at this point? If you like this live stream and you'd like us to do it again, do let us know. You know, comment on the Facebook page, send us a message, get in touch, share our page around Facebook as well. I'm sure there are people that you know that are at home at this point that would like something to watch, something to distract them, and maybe learn something as well. So do share this with people. That really helps us out as well. It is a real privilege to be able to teach in the woods where I grew up as a child the things that I love and I'm passionate about. So I really do appreciate the position I'm in that I get to do that. So if you want to help me out and help Max out, share it around, see how many views we can get, see if we can get some people on some courses enjoying nature as well. Yeah, I hope you're all well, I hope you're all safe, and managing to find some peace at this interesting time that we're all living through. We'll be in the woods as often as possible, so we might well do another one of these if there's interest in it.
It's been fun.
It has been,
really fun,
hasn't it? Yeah. Oh, we've had a laugh. So yeah, much rather be out here with people in real life, but in that substitute, this is fun. Yeah, I suppose that's all we've got really. Look after one another, be excellent to each other, and party on.
Thank you very much, guys.